Hello. Yeah, this is the Fool and the Philosopher.
The Philosopher and the Fool.
It seems like at some point in evolution, it determined that it was better to be afraid of things that look like snakes and spiders because they're camouflage poisonous creatures.
Oh, yeah.
So that's more advantage to be afraid of things that look like them than not to be, which means rationality not only isn't always good, it can actually be negative.
Well, the whole thing with cats having an irrational fear of cucumbers. I saw this video, it's incredible. There's a cat just lying there sunning itself, and the snake comes up to it, and as it's striking, the cat catapults itself backwards and punches the snake in the head. So it completely dodges and also moves, and so that's like pure instinct reflexes. And so when you throw a cucumber at a cat, that's their brain going, that's a snake, bail. And so they hurdle themselves because once a snake has started striking, it actually can't change trajectory. And so a cat has like a built-in dodge to a snake strike, and cats are faster.
So you could imagine, I can't think of a specific thing right now, but like an Islamophobia, homophobia, a xenophobia, all these things that are considered irrational, right? But you could imagine, I think xenophobia would be the easiest. Like, you're afraid of outsiders. Not necessarily people of a different race, just people that aren't part of your tribe, right?
Yeah.
And if they come to you, let's say you lived through a time, like thousands of years, where the disease was horrible for whatever reason. And you'd say, yeah, well, now we live in the modern era where we have medicines that can cure everything. But then occasionally you mess up and you have a plague and everyone dies.
Yeah.
So even though it's irrational because you know you're perfectly safe, that still could be beneficial to have all those false positives. For example, you said like if you're on top of a 10-story building, then you're being irrational. But if you live in one of those, they're not tax write-offs, but they're stock write-offs in China, right? Those buildings they build just so that people will give them...
tofu dray construction.
So just so that the government will give them money for investing in housing, basically. Yeah. If you're standing in one of those things, you know, it's irrational because everything's been checked and it's safe. But this society well, that's not as good as the xenophobic, I guess. But basically, it may never affect your life, but society might wither and die if you don't implement the value of xenophobia or homophobia or whatever it might be. Now, that's very hard to determine.
Yeah.
And it could be that society withers and dies if you have xenophobia and homophobia, as I said, right? Like, it's very hard to know which one it would be. Or, well, you look at, like, the Romans, right? They eventually became accepting of the Christians, and the Romans aren't around anymore.
Yeah.
Not saying that that was the cause, but it could have been. Because you have the society that's based around triumph and excellence, and it shifts to a culture that's more about the divine inherent within each person. And about how even slaves are worthy of God's love, and maybe even more worthy of God's love. And so it became, you can look at it in a way as a religion that worships the weak, and it doesn't, you know, it's kind of an equality religion.
Yeah.
But it was created by slaves to say that we're equal, so in a way it is trying to say, hey, no, we have value too.
Was it made by slaves, or was it made by the downtrodden?
The downtrodden, I guess.
One of the things I actually learned about this recently is after Jesus' death, there's the 13 disciples left over, or whatever.
Yeah, 12, I think, but yeah.
Yeah. So, I think it's Peter, Paul, or John. It's one of the big ones.
Yeah.
He stayed in Jerusalem, and he was in the first cathedral. He was like the first bishop or whatever. And he proselytized from there and had followers come to that. All the other disciples went out into the world to basically missionary, try to convert people, proselytize down the world. All of them died horribly, except for the guy who stayed in the temple, and he died of old age.
I think that was Peter, but yeah. I'm not entirely sure.
But all the other ones were basically killed by angry mobs.
Yeah, it wasn't a very popular religion for quite a while after Jesus' death. It took a bit. It was Paul that eventually got it going, I think, and he was one of the people that went around murdering Christians, I believe, in his younger days. He's Paul the Apostle for a reason, right? Like, he was not a Christian.
Yeah.
And then he switched over. And apostasy is always very powerful because you basically say, I was devoted to this other religion, but yours is so much better that it is obvious that I need to convert to your religion. And he switched over. So
yeah, well, it's weird because another thing I didn't know is apparently a lot of the early teachers of Christianity were converted Jews, actually. And
They'd have to be, I guess, yeah.
well, they already had the structure and know-how, and so they converted over.
But I wonder, like, if the Romans had been a bit more religiphobic, I don't know what you'd call it. If, like, there's been persecution, religious persecution for thousands of years. It's something that happened. But if we had even more religious persecution, like zero tolerance, like Chinese level of, what was her name? The first and only female Chinese emperor. She comes into power. She's like, Taoism's out, Confucianism's in, kill all the Taoists. Yeah. And then you have the CCP, and they're like, religion's out, kill all the Confucians. And then you have Xi Jinping, who's like, Confucianism's back in, babe. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if Christianity is the full reason that the Romans collapsed, because there's a lot of factors. Like, there's slavery. The Huns, not the Huns, was it the Mongols?
The Huns, the Huns did quite a bit of damage to them, yeah.
Yeah.
And the Visigoths.
The barbarians.
Yeah, in general.
The Vandals. Part of it was overextension.
I'm not sure if it was overextension exactly. Like, obviously, it was a massive empire, right? Yeah. But when Aurelian came in, he basically rebuilt the empire from scratch, and he fixed everything. So it was too big for almost anyone to handle, right?
Yeah.
But there were people that could handle it.
Yeah.
And you just need those emperors. And I guess, if you look at the history of Roman emperors as well, they had like 10 good ones maybe.
Yeah.
Out of like 50. Like
I think a lot of Rome literally ran off the momentum of the first emperor.
Yeah, like Augustus Caesar.
Yeah, like a lot of it ran off the momentum of Augustus. And he was taking the Roman Republic, which, well, it had its issues. It was basically at the height of the Roman Republic, he then converted into the empire.
So I think Augustus in the Bible, right? Like, he actually gets angry at Pontius Pilate, or whatever his name, Pilate. He gets angry at him for his management of
the situation,
Palestine, or whatever they call the country. So maybe it was Augustus's fault if he had just said, no, you should have killed Jesus, and you should have. Well, no, wait.
Well, Pontius didn't want to kill Jesus either.
Yeah, but he kind of let the whole thing get out of hand, I guess.
Yeah, then the divide of the empire, because the West collapsed, fell apart, and there was the Eastern Empire. Eastern Empire was like hyper Christian. They were insanely Christian, and they were fairly brutal.
And they lasted for a much longer time, but they were. Yeah, but they were very conniving and underhanded, and they used diplomacy as a weapon.
I told you about that square I went to, where he had all the protesters show up to the square.
Yeah.
And then the soldiers surrounded them and killed them all.
And that was just like Byzantine 101.
Yeah, you're sort of like, oh, this is a cool square. Oh my god, like tens of thousands of people were murdered here.
Yeah, like they would just poison or lie or backstab or like, and they kept going for much longer than the rest of the empire.
Yeah.
So,
and then their downfall was basically hubris. They just, we'll hide behind our walls are invincible. We'll hide behind our walls are invincible.
But the problem with Christianity is that it says there are things greater than your own life, right? Like you can die in service to God, not for your own glory, but because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Like, you can have a glorious death under, I don't know, Jovinism or whatever. Like, for Jupiter's sake, you can die heroically and you'll be put in the Hall of Heroes. But Christianity, it's a bit different. You're dying for society, or you're dying for the morality of God.
Yeah.
And that means that your society can crumble and fall apart, but you're still winning.
Yeah.
I think Trudeau, actually, the current Trudeau, Justin, said it quite well when he said, if you fight your enemies, they win. Which is the idea, if you go down in the mud, then to fight your opponent, both of you end up covered in mud, right? No matter who wins. So a lot of people made fun of Trudeau for that, but I think his point is correct in a way if you look at it from like a deontological perspective of if you fight through the wrong means, then you haven't your opponent is winning because they're proving that is the only way to fight.
And the other thing with Christianity, like, we look at the collapse of Rome, but like Christianity was also a major driving factor of the British Empire. And they had like a 200-year run of taking over the world.
Yeah, Yeah, about 200 years. It would have been from the failed invasion of Spain until about World War One. Yeah.
Yeah, and World War One kind of destroyed them.
Yeah, bankrupted them. There's I can't remember where I saw it, but someone was wondering like, why is the United States so rich, and where did all the British Empire's money go?
Yeah.
The British Empire gave it to the United States.
Yeah, basically. And then World War II came, and the same thing happened again.
Yeah.
And the UK went into debt.
No, they weren't asking why the United States was so rich. They were saying what happened to the British Empire's wealth, and why could the United States afford they were saying the United States should stop having all these wars. Like wars don't make profit for people. That's a ridiculous idea. They're like, there's no, the military industrial complex doesn't exist. It's like, but the United States is rich because of war. Like that.
That's
that is
why there's this whole thing currently of people saying that Churchill isn't the hero you think he is.
Because he sold America. He sold the empire to
America.
Yeah. Well, the thing, in Churchill's defense, maybe the Americans did actually. They don't call themselves an empire, but they basically kept up the mantle, right? Like, if you were to paint a map of the American Empire with like full honesty, right?
Yeah.
You'd have Canada still. You'd have expansions into Germany and Japan.
Yeah.
You'd have
the UK, basically.
You'd have the UK more or less. You'd have most of Europe, really, at this point. Like Ukraine would be a contested zone in a sense, and you'd have like the Scandinavians wouldn't be part of it probably, and Australia, I don't know.
No, I don't think Australia's not under their sphere of influence.
Yeah, you would have Taiwan even, or that would be a contested zone, and
the Philippines.
Yeah, a lot of South America in a lot of ways, because they just sent they basically did what the Dutch did, right? You don't conquer anywhere, you just send your companies to go and take them over. And so you look at like Chiquita or Dole. The Chiquita does bananas, Dole does pineapple.
Yeah.
And Chiquita basically conquered South America, and Dole did conquer Hawaii, and they're the reason that Hawaii is part of the United States. So that one was a bit more on the nose.
Yeah. No, I've heard it's like a weird, I don't know, subgroup of conservative political leaning, which they just want America to do imperialism instead of corporatism takeover.
Right.
Like just go full British imperialism, but the United States. So they just like have a McDonald's in every country. Like that's the sort of thing. Like,
have you seen the
imperialism?
I don't know where it came from originally, but it's the solution to the conflict in the Middle East, and it shows new borders drawn over the Middle East, like Palestine and Israel are both included inside of it, and it's just a Walmart flag, and it shows like a Walmart businessman looking all
I haven't seen
all
that.
imperial.
Well, I think the British imperialism potentially works better than the corporate imperialism. Because corporate imperialism is based around trying to make profit, whereas...
Well, if your empire doesn't make profit, it falls though, so...
Yeah. Whereas British imperialism...
You could argue
was trying to put Britain everywhere.
Yeah, you could argue with the company that they're an ideological corporation instead of a monetary corporation.
Yeah.
They still need to make money to survive, but they don't need to make... They only need to make enough money to be profitable. They don't actually need to make more than that, in theory.
Yeah, like one of the things with British conquest of everywhere, which is kind of one of the only ways... Like, there's 3 ways, basically, to take over a country. One is the Roman method of Pax Romanus. You guys keep running, but you pay us taxes. And we'll give you some of our stuff. And you have to follow our laws. Then the other one is you annihilate the country. And then the third way is the British one, which is very similar to the Pax Romanus, but instead of, you follow our laws, you do this, you're British now. You're going to have to do what we do. We're going to try and make you as British as we possibly can. And weirdly enough, it worked in some ways, like the Pakistan and India loving cricket and...
Yeah.
Well,
most of the world having British values somewhere, like
most
random islands.
Everyone likes soccer.
Yeah. Well, I think I wonder actually, because that's a very like Latin American thing as well, right? So of course the Spanish colonized the other half of the world basically. Like what was it called that the Pope gave to Portugal and Spain? It was the writ of Terris Mundus or something, where he said like, you get half the world.
Yeah. But and then the British left, basically, multiple reasons.
They probably couldn't afford to keep it going.
That's part of it. They couldn't afford to keep it going.
And the public didn't want to do it anymore.
Public didn't want to do it anymore. There were several philosophies that made propositions to say the British shouldn't rule anymore. Let these countries rule themselves. And,
you see it with the States right now, I think, where there's a lot of people pushing for isolationism again.
Yeah.
And you do get it, because it's like, why do we have to be in everyone's war? Why do we have to... and why do we have to be the world police? Now, it's funny because that's...
the one thing that the Americans should realize, though, unless you're going to get to this point, is if they stop doing that, America will not be as rich as it is if they go into isolation.
No, that's not where I'm going, but yeah, that's probably true.
Like, the Americans are absurdly rich. It's funny because they're so culturally powerful. We all look at Americans and like, oh, this is just the way things are. But the poorest Americans are like middle class.
Well, it depends. Like, in terms of raw money, sure, but in if someone is homeless and doesn't have any food, they're kind of the same everywhere, right?
I don't think people starve in America.
No, not really. Not unless there's something going on, like abuse or
like
they don't pride or
Eastern Europeans, like poor Eastern Europeans, are concerned with starving to death. Even lower class Eastern Europeans are concerned with starving.
Well, starving. Well, this was 4 years ago, right? But starving was basically gone from the world about 4 years ago.
Yeah.
The pandemic might have changed that figure, but I think if you're like you can take like a rich Filipino and they're going to be rich. Like Haiti has a billionaire in it, right? Like there's 1 billionaire in Haiti, so you can have rich people anywhere, and poor people anywhere.
I have a surprising amount of people.
But your average American is way richer than your average.
I have a surprising amount of people in my stream from North Africa that I talk in the little chat section. And one of the guys was talking about what's the best way for him to make money online. And we're basically just discussing, going through the various different things. And I say, you could try look at Fiverr and saying, like, I have this problem. You basically need a degree to make money online. That's one of the things that he was observing. And I was saying, well, you can like pick up jobs and stuff. And he's saying, the only way to make money in North Africa is to do it online and make money off Americans, because their money is actually worth something. My local money is not worthwhile. Like, everyone's cheap. You're like, the money you make off it is just terrible. So it's like, if he works under wage through online contracting through America, he's going to like get middle class sort of levels of money.
Yeah.
For his country.
I'm sure he knows about like the Mechanical Turks and stuff that Amazon does, where they just hired like.
Well, he's quite young,
right?
So
okay, maybe he doesn't know.
I think he's a teenager,
and maybe it's more of an Indian thing. But Amazon has this Mechanical Turk program where they just give you like $1 to do. They basically have this list of like thousands of tasks.
Yeah,
and it's something like, excuse me, it's things like click on the CAPTCHA on this website, or it'll be, send me 3 URLs that have this thing, or it'll be like a lot of it's CAPTCHAs these days, right? It's like finish these CAPTCHAs, and they're basically things that you can't automate in your company.
Yeah.
But it's a waste of your time to hire someone to do.
Yeah.
So you're like, I'll pay 12 cents to someone to do it. It'll take them a second, and they all go through Amazon. Amazon just has this Mechanical Turk program that they do, and so you can make. I think I've seen the numbers like around $100 a day if you're really going at it.
Yeah. It's like that. Was it even Amazon that their AI was actually just an Indian call center basically? Or is like some group their AI was just a bunch of.
Well, that's what a Mechanical Turk is.
Yeah.
It's an the original story was
the chess playing
the chess
robot with the
robot.
guy underneath.
Yeah.
But like they had a sort of ChatGPT like robot, some company.
Oh yeah.
And it was just a bunch of Indians in a call center.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember who that was. I can't remember, but yeah.
But that's like, again, the Mechanical Turk.
Yeah, and Amazon, they do have a screening process for it. So if you live in like North America, you typically can't do it. And I think the reason might be an ethical one, or
it might be a legal one. Honestly,
it might be.
You have to actually pay someone a certain amount of wages.
It could be, but it could also be. Look, we don't want you to take away from the people that can benefit most, but I don't know which is better. Like, we've talked, I think, on the podcast about all like ridiculous immigration coming to Canada, right?
Yeah.
And the thing about that, I just think, adding it now, I don't blame any of the immigrants for trying to pull one over the system, right?
Yeah.
It's like they're desperate. They're like, I just want to, I just want to make money. I want to be in the rich country.
Yeah, no, definitely.
But it's the country's responsibility to like, our country isn't going to be a rich country if we if we let people keep pulling one over us. But the people trying to go for it, it's like the reason. But you could say though, is this harsh and xenophobic? I'm not sure, but it could be that the reason your country is the way it is and you want to get out of there and come to Canada is because you are willing to pull one over the system, whereas Canadians aren't. We when the government does something, we go, okay, yeah, we'll just, which to our detriment sometimes. But there's also a strength and trust.
So digital nomads, you know what those are. Yeah. We actually they're not really nomads, but we sort of get the idea up here of them. So when I look up my clients, because I go to houses, and a large percent of houses I go to are newly bought houses. They're not new houses, but like they've lived in them for a year.
Yeah.
I look at the phone number, and our provinces and territories have attachments in front of them, basically, which give you the area code.
Yeah.
And a large amount of them are Ontario, Alberta, and British Columbia phone numbers with the area code in front of them. And so a lot of new houses that get bought here are basically young couples who have a job that they can do online.
And they want to go where cheaper housing is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of destroys the value of the people here because we can only make so much money here and they have their Toronto wage and
yeah, and then you go one step further, which is if you have like your online influencer, let's say, and you make $1,000 a month, that's not great. However, you can do this calculation of I will make this $1,000 no matter what I do.
So I'll go to the Philippines.
Yes, I'll go to the Philippines, and you're rich there.
I kind of wonder, I've been thinking about this for a while with the Philippines in particular. They have a huge amount of immigration in the Philippines. And they have a huge amount of emigration in the Philippines. Yeah. Like, all the Filipinos are leaving. And the Philippines
is just going to be a cultural swap
yeah.
of you're going to have Filipinos are going to disperse throughout the world.
Yeah.
And then a bunch of Philippines is going to be filled with influencers and digital nomads. Yeah. And there won't actually be any real...
And, like, retirees and stuff, yeah.
There won't be actually any real people there.
Like, I would...
What I mean by real people is...
There's no society.
There's no actual production there.
And I wonder... I'd love to see some graphs of it, maybe, where, like, what is the intake and the output of the Philippines and what's their culture? Because the Philippines, they're kind of unique in a way about this because their culture is already so mixed up and...
The language of the Philippines is Tagalog.
Yeah, which is just every language in one.
Yeah, it's like we have a church here that gives a service in Tagalog, and I would be curious to attend that just to see how much I could understand.
There's actually a pretty decent, I forget its name unfortunately, but there's a pretty decent Filipino martial arts movie, and it's in Tagalog, and I watched it and I understood the whole thing basically because it's. Because they also speak in English a lot of the time. Yeah. Like, Tagalog has a lot of English, but they also just speak in English a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And then they... how's that work?
Isn't Tagalog like Spanish, Portuguese...
The native language.
And English?
Yeah. But so I think what happens in the Philippines is you speak in Tagalog, but then if there's something emotional... Like, you know how French Canadians will swear in French, for instance?
Yeah.
It's like that, except if you give someone a heart-to-heart in... the Philippines, you do it in English. Like if something really matters to you, you say it in English. It's sort of like I know an example how British people will use French to talk about really high fluty tooty ideas.
Yeah,
they'll be like, it's the piece de resistance, like that.
Yeah.
So the Philippines do that with English, but they also do it for like full sentences and paragraphs and that sort of thing. So if it's like, and I
wonder how easy it is for English people to learn Tagalog, because one of the problems is it's actually kind of hard for English people to learn other languages besides like German.
Yeah, well, I guess it depends on the roots. Like, I think like German, Latin, French, Spanish, like they all have a lot of similarities. And like Latin, I think in particular is almost...
Well, Latin's super easy for English.
Sort of. It's like entirely incorporated into English in a lot of ways, but the order and the usage is weird, right? So,
like, one of the ways to be good at geography is to literally learn a bit of Latin. Like, if you're doing geography in school, just learn
so like isostatic, you're like, oh, it means equal measure of a stationary.
Because one of the big parts of geography, quite literally, is knowing all the terms.
Equally stationary, I guess it'd be, yeah.
And so it's just you just learn a little bit of Latin.
Well, that's not true just for geography. That's true for science in general. They used to teach Latin in school exactly for that reason, so that you'd have a leg up in all the sciences and everything.
That honestly makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, because it gives you a foundation in everything.
Like the names of I can't remember, but basically there's certain like a lot of cities are whatever city.
Yeah.
And city on the mountain.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. So, what would be one like
Hamburg is mountain city.
Or what about Bath in the UK? So Bath, this one's really complicated, but basically, there's a big bath.
Yeah. Yeah, but Hamburg's mountain city.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. Hamletburg city. It's like city.
Yeah.
Because I think it would be city. Yeah.
Berg is also mountain.
Berg. Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I guess. Oh, it depends how you spell it. If it was with a U, it would be like a town, and if it was with an E, then it...
Yeah.
But Hamburg's with a... maybe it is both. Anyways.
Yeah, well, like mountain and town are basically the same thing in German.
This seems like a good place. I've been wanting to talk about this. It's this tiny little thing, right? But Roman names. I don't know if I've talked about this before. But so let's take Augustus Caesar, who we were talking about. So his actual name was Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus.
Yeah.
So he had like 5 names. So what does that mean exactly? Well, so his name was actually Gaius Julius. So his first name is Gaius, his last name is Julius.
Yeah.
So then what's with the Caesar Augustus, right? So Caesar was his nickname. So Romans didn't often use their first name or their last name when talking to each other. They would use their nickname. So Cicero is the famous one. He was the writer, the lawman and the writer. And his name was Chickpea.
Yeah.
Cicero. And when he went into politics, his friends were like, okay, you got to change your nickname. And he's like, no, I'm just keeping my nickname. And so Chickpea is now one of the most famous people in history. And so Caesar was the nickname. Now, of course, you're like, but Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus's uncle was also named Gaius Julius Caesar.
Yeah.
So do they have the same nickname? And the answer is yes, because that is the family nickname.
Family nickname?
Because basically, if you got a nickname, there was a chance it'd be inherited through your family and become the family nickname. So Julius Caesar, the first tyrant of Rome or whatever you'd call him, or the last leader of the Republic. Yeah. So his name was Gaius as well.
Yeah.
And Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus, I guess you could actually say was his proper name would have been Octavius Gaius Julius Caesar. But Gaius, he took that as he took the Gaius Julius when he was adopted.
Yeah.
So he took his uncle's name and nickname. So he took his uncle's last name and nickname. Yeah.
That's kind of funny that there's
and his first name.
I like family nicknames.
Yeah. So then Augustus, you're like, okay, what's Augustus at the end? That's his nickname.
Yeah.
So you could have a family nickname, but then you could also have a nickname which you stuck on top of that. So Augustus means August, like people love you. You know, you're a high up figure basically. Yeah. So what does Caesar mean? This one's kind of weird.
It means leafy greens covered in whitish sauce with croutons.
So there, I believe some people. This is like the least likely one, right? Caesarean section.
Yeah.
I think that's named after Julius Caesar, but there is a theory that it's the other way around. That it was named after that, but some people think it means like curly haired or something.
Yeah.
Now Julius Caesar himself actually said what it meant, but people don't believe him because it was too cool, basically. So Caesar says it means elephant because one of his ancestors killed an elephant, and so he got the nickname of Elephant.
So Lord of the Rings, people would take the name of Mandakill, and they'd have like Hero Mandakill.
If they killed a...
And Umbarakil, and it basically meant great conqueror of this location. So that's kind of similar to these.
Yeah, so he killed an elephant, or maybe in the Lord of the Rings case, you killed one of those.
It wasn't killed. The Mandakill meant conqueror, so they're the conqueror of Umbar.
Right.
So Umbardakill would be conqueror of Umbar Hardar.
Right, the Oliphant, or what I'm thinking of. Yeah, but the Mamakill rode Oliphant. Is that how that worked, or?
No, the Mamakill was the Oliphant.
Mamakill was an Oliphant?
Yeah.
Like there was an Oliphant named Mamakill.
No, they're the same creature. That's just, the Hobbit name is Oliphant.
Oh.
Their proper name is Mamakill.
Which is like conquerors. Or...
No, they're called Mamakill because that's the name language of the Easterlings.
So the Easterlings language is the conqueror's language or something?
It's the language of the Gondorians and the Easterlings. That's a common tongue. And then the Mamakill was from the Elven tongue of Sindari, I believe. Because the Gondorians all spoke Sindari because they're speaking French instead of the common language.
Yeah. Romans had family nicknames, which I thought, and they had these great.
That's not even from the Silmarillion. That's just from the appendices.
Jeez.
Yeah, family nickname. On the other themed names, one of the things I find really funny is so cast your mind back in time. So there's this land that is rich and full of resources. There's sheep and grain. And it's in the Middle East, though. But this is in the past, so it's quite this wealthy land. And it's surrounded by all these interesting countries where they have like these insane names, right? And all the most famous figures in this land have very interesting names. Like John, and Paul, and David, and Joseph. I just think it's so funny that the names from the Bible, like the names that are super common to us, are these ancient names. And it's not even like, oh, they translated them to make them more suitable to us. No, we took those names they had and we used them.
And put them everywhere, yeah.
And they're normal names to us. But like these super simple normal names are ancient, like insanely old.
And the names for...
And they were using names that were like, what is his actual name? Like...
it was...
Emmanuel?
It was like Joseph or something.
Joseph, yeah, it's like named after his dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Joseph, and that's based off, like, that's an old traditional names, Joseph.
Yeah, or is it Joshua or something like that.
Yeah, Joshua.
Yeah. Joshua.
Yeah, but like, that's a old traditional names for them.
And if you take, like, Anglo-Saxon names or even older names, like the Celtic names or something, they sound foreign.
Yeah.
Like, you take, like, a Hulka or an Aethelwed or
yeah, well, even my name, Connor.
Yeah, Connor. And actually, well, I mean, Connor is a bit more common, right? And so is like Aaron, Cameron.
Yeah, well, if we go to the origination of Connor, which is like,
so not all,
or whatever.
But it's funny because like a Connor, a Cameron, an Aaron, a Conan, they all seem kind of normal. They all seem kind of like in the same realm as a David or a John or a Joseph, but those are from very different parts of the world.
Yeah.
And I think, but if you look at how they were changed, like the spellings and the pronunciations actually became more like Semitic rather than more Celtic, right?
Yeah.
Like because if you look at how like Aaron is spelled in the original form, it's like EERIEIN, but we changed it to be the much more simple Semitic sort of spelling where they have the very few letters and yeah.
I find that so funny though.
But then we don't pronounce like some of the stuff, like we pronounce J's with a hard J, so there was some change obviously.
Yeah, there is some change for language, but
because most of the world, like Julius Caesar, that's not his name, it's Julius Kaiser.
Yeah.
Julius Kaiser, yeah. And so, yeah, we changed it there. Yeah. So you want to talk about racist orcs?
Yes, I do. I'm very... So, there's Rings of Power Season 2. There's a scene where there's an orc family. So there's an orc with his orc wife and his orc baby. And people are up in arms against that.
Okay.
And people are saying, oh, orcs are these brutal killing machines. They don't have families. Like a bunch of people saying like they are the servants of Sauron. They don't have any will of their own. They're going to kill and die. And they're spawned from the earth or whatever. So one of my favorite parts of Lord of the Rings is the conversation between Gorbag and his friend. I can't remember his friend's name at the moment. But it's when Frodo's being captured. Sam has the One Ring... Shagrat. Sam has the One Ring on. And he's listening to their conversation. And he's like, oh, this prisoner is mine. And it's like, no, we should take him back down. There's no, I have the authority up in the tower. And so they're both these high up orcs with their own soldiers under their command. But they know each other, and it's close as what you could call orcs friends. Like, when this all blows over, we should take some trusted boys and go find a nice place to lay down with some good loot, like the battle days. And like, these guys know each other for a while. And then it's not humanizing, but you actually get a view into the orcs. And then they kill each other because they both want Frodo's shirt. I believe Gorbag saying, no, this is for the Nazgul, and Shagrat saying, oh, it's just a bit of loot, let me have it instead. And so they kill each other over that. And that's just what orcs are. And then there's another scene where there's I think it's a black Ulak or something of Mordor, like a big fighting orc and a tracker orc are going along together and they're looking for Sam Frodo. And the tracker says, screw this, I'm going home. The black sneak, which is Gollum, screwed up the trail. I can't find anything anymore. I'm going home. And the fighting orc says, where do you think you're going, you useless tracker? Come back here. And he's like, no, I'm leaving. You'll have to catch me first. It's like, give me your name and number. I'm going to report you to the Nazgul. And he just runs away. And so the fighting orc shoots him and kills the tracker. And then Sam says to Frodo, if only all orcs could be so aggressive to each other and like keep killing each other and be so argumentative, then they'd sort this whole thing out and we won't have to fight. And Frodo goes, orcs are always like that. They hate each other, but they hate us more. And they'll stop fighting each other if they have the opportunity to kill us.
And is this only from the animation where there's a road and 2 columns of orcs?
No, that's the 2 columns the animation has it's evil men and orcs collide with each other.
Yeah. How
they get out of the column because they're marching with them is they're all trying to pour into this one fort. And basically different breeds of orcs are going, no, we should get in first. No, we should get in first. And so it's like Orc High, the fighting Orc High. There's orcs from the Misty Mountain. And so they fight each other because they collide, because they have disagreements. And the column of orcs that Sam and Frodo are put into are non-fighting orcs. And so there's larger orcs with whips whipping them on into battle. And these orcs don't really like fighting as much. They're not the big, scary fighting orcs.
Yeah, well, isn't the implication that the, like, on the other side of Mount Doom, there's, like, a massive orc society or something?
It's not orc society. So the orcs, in Lord of the Rings, so there is an area of Mordor where green things grow, and so the orcs there have slaves, basically kept, and that's how they get all their food. So the food is brought to them, and they live in the rest of Mordor.
What is a...
But the orcs, a lot of how orcs survive in Mordor anyways, is they get food from that area by the sea where it's green and growing, and then they also get food from the Easterlings and the Southrons, basically paying tribute to Sauron, because Sauron's the closest thing they have to a god.
So what is a non-fighting orc? Like could a hobbit beat one in a fist fight or something?
So the non-fighting orcs are the goblins of Moria, the tracker. They're like smaller, weaker.
Because orcs are already pretty small and weak, right? Like they're...
orcs aren't weak. They are small, but they're deceptively strong.
Because like the Orc High, which are massive, powerful, the best of the best orcs.
Yeah.
They're like 5 feet tall or something, right?
No, the Orc High are the same as his men.
Because, but remember there's that part where the warband of Orc High, which has lost like half their number, is bragging that they won a fight that was like 200-1 against the Man of Gondor.
Yeah, so Boromir the Tall is like 6 feet tall.
But they're not saying like, oh, we beat a Gondor hero, but they're like, we beat the Man of Gondor.
Yeah.
We are the fighting Orc High.
A lot of men of Gondor are like Gondorian men are huge.
Yeah.
And Boromir was tall for Gondors, but then Aragorn is Longshanks. Aragorn is taller than Boromir the Tall.
And Legolas is like 15 feet tall.
Apparently. Yeah. There's like that one calculation where
well, it's just like they say he's as tall as a young tree or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Legolas is actually slightly smaller than.
I don't know. It says as tall as a young tree. What's the name of that hasty ent?
Quickbeam.
So Quickbeam's a young tree. So how tall is Quickbeam?
Yeah, but so back to the orcs. Like non-fighting orc, hobbits call them goblins, and I think like a hobbit and a hobbin and a goblin,
a hobbit and a goblin,
or a non-fighting orc are probably kind of equally matched. And I think hobbits are probably tougher, where the goblins are stronger.
Right.
Because hobbits are deceptively tanky.
But yeah, and so they're kind of on equal footing, though. They could wrestle with each other and fight.
Yeah. One of the big things about orcs, though, is you're a Gondorian man. You're not going to get attacked by one orc. It's going to be 3 orcs that are going to attack you, and they're going to like bite you and stab you with like poison knives and arrows.
But you even take like a man of Bree. I don't know which culture they're from, but you take like a man of Bree.
Yeah.
They're probably going to beat an orc 1-on-1, right? Like
maybe the Brees, like the most men who aren't Gondorian or Rovanian or from Rohan, I guess, aren't super into fighting, whereas orcs look for every advantage and backstab and are more fighting. Even the non-fighting orcs, they live in a nasty society of backbiting and stabbing and killing each other for every little advantage.
But I imagine an orc is probably like 3 feet tall or something. Like they're
like 4 feet tall. They're like 4.
But still, they're not like monsters or anything.
Well, they're bow-legged and long. Like
I kind of like
their arms are. A lot of them can run on all 4s because they've got long arms.
I kind of like how they're drawn in the Hobbit animation, where they're very wide. They're very
weird fat goblins.
Yeah, they're kind of like pigs almost.
Mm-hmm.
They're very stout, and I don't know where the pig-headed orc. I guess Orcus has.
The pig-headed orc is just the orc mythology sort of.
Well, there isn't orcs in mythology though. Like Tolkien invented them, so it's.
They're I guess goblin head. I don't know.
I'm not sure where.
I really like Lord of the Ring orcs.
Orcus was a real god. Maybe he had a pig head then.
I really like Lord of the Ring orcs.
Okay, so regarding racism in orcs.
So, besides just basically the correcting that orcs actually do have lives, but they are different than us. They're remarkably different than us.
Yeah, kind of orange and blue morality.
Yeah, it's quite literally. It's not even the way they're raised as such. It's orcs will be nasty. Like, that is in their nature. And then I want to go further from Lord of the Rings and move to Dungeons and Dragons, 2nd edition, and look at orcs. Even actually on the 4th edition, orcs are really interesting in its description. Orcs don't build. Like, they will maybe make tents, but where orcs live is places they have conquered. And they'll live there until they run out of resources, then they'll go and conquer a new spot. And how orcs' leadership work is the biggest, toughest orc is the leader. And so orcs are quite literally an entity of destruction that go from place to place.
Are Tolkien's orcs green?
No. They're gray-skinned.
Okay, yeah.
Lord of the Ring, Dungeon Dragon orcs are also not green until 5th edition.
So it was Warhammer.
It's Warhammer and Warcraft that made them green.
And Warcraft everything Blizzard has ever done is just stealing from Games Workshop.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, but orcs are kind of like bluish, gray-skinned.
Because they're meant to be like corpses, basically, right?
Yeah, they're like these... Basically, until 5th edition, orcs are these pig-faced, grayish, blue-skinned monsters.
It would be the 1st edition, I guess, of...
like they actually have pig heads.
Yeah, that art. I forgot that artist, but I love his drawing of the orcs. They look... Yeah. They're kind of the perfect enemy, right? Yeah. They look like they're tough and scary, but like you could probably beat like 3 or 4 of them, and like they're perfect.
Yeah. But they're like literally these entities of destruction. And one of the things, orcs typically do not have traps built in their bases unless there were traps already there. And then they'll only reset them. They won't repair them. And if they take out a wall, they'll put up a crude barricade in its place. So that's orcs. That's actually what they are. And half-orcs, you think about, half-orcs are horrifying in basically the editions.
Yeah, there's only one way those are coming about, basically.
Yeah, but half-orc in orc society will have problems because they'll basically be a lesser thing. And a half-orc in human society, everyone knows what happened to them.
And why do they have, is it 2nd edition up or 3rd edition up? They have bonus strength, right?
So, it's because half-orcs are based off Uruk-hai, and Uruk-hai are strong.
Right.
And so it's basically they have savage, stupid strength. So half-orcs are really ugly and stupid, but they're quite strong. So, like, if a half-elf and a half-dwarf, they're called dwelves, take the worst features of both. They are awful, horrible creatures in earlier editions of D&D. Like, the children of elves and dwarves have the worst qualities of both their parents. They don't get any of the good. Whereas humans and half-elves and humans and half-dwarfs. Like, anything that has children with a human, they basically get the best qualities of both.
Half dwarf.
Yeah. And so orcs are like small kind of, like they slowly became bigger than humans, but they're like around the same size. But basically they get the orc savage strength, but they get the humans physique.
And they sort of got blended with like ogres or something,
Yeah.
I guess, in a way.
Yeah.
Do they have good ogres in 0 or 1 or whatever it's called?
I don't know.
That'd be kind of funny. Right, so we got the racism of...
So orcs are, and then we go to dark elves, right? So I was thinking about this quite a bit. So we have like, what's the percentage of psychopaths in our society? Like 2?
Yeah, something like that.
So dark elf society is the inverse of us. They are 98% psychopath.
Yeah.
And 2% non. Dritz is not a psychopath.
Yeah.
But it's not even like, oh, we just take the dark elves and we raise them differently, or oh, if they don't worship Loth, it's like, no. Dark elves, like, their culture sucks, let's just say that at the start. They are slavers, they are nasty, they kill each other a bunch, and that's all in their culture. But even if we were to strip Loth from them, because she kind of controls them, dark elves would not make good societies, because they are psychopaths.
So, that kind of raises a question, though, right? You meet a dark elf.
Yeah.
And this actually second Baldur's Gate 2 Shadow of Am actually kind of addresses this. You meet a dark elf, how do you treat them first impression, right? Because you can't just you can give them a chance, right? Because there is, there's one good dark elf.
There's a 2% chance they'll be a Dritz.
Yeah. I think it's probably lower than that for the dark elves. But there is the occasional good dark elf.
Yeah.
Maybe there's only one good dark elf. But you don't want to just dismiss Dritz because he's a dark elf, right? Like he's one of the greatest heroes in the world.
Yeah.
So you don't want to just, and you could possibly, if Dritz had never known any kindness, maybe he would have just said, "What's the point?" Right?
Yeah.
So you don't want to just say, "Oh, you're horrible because you're a dark elf." But on the other hand, which they kind of do in Shadow of Am, there's this lady you rescue like 2 or 3 times, who's a dark elf, and she is pretty nasty.
Yeah.
But you can have her join your party, and because you give her a second chance, and I think she is kind of like, she tries to do good by you and that sort of thing. Yeah. I believe. I don't actually have her in my party because
she tries to. I know a bit more about her just because I've read about her. But she tries to do good by you, but she is awful the whole time.
Yeah, like she's very much.
She's trying to accommodate for you, but
she's very much a dark elf in culture, and
yeah,
like we should torture these people and kill them and all that sort of thing. And the question kind of becomes, so you run into a dark elf. What do you do? Do you say, okay, I'm just going to, maybe they could be good, but I'm not going to take that risk? Or do you say, I'll treat them like a normal person, but I'm going to keep my eye on them? Or because the problem becomes, once you start, so the obvious answer is that you say, okay, keep an eye on them because they're a dark elf, but maybe they're a Dritz, so we'll give them a chance, right?
Yeah.
But the problem becomes then...
they could be playing the long game so they can stab you in the back, because a dark elf would do that.
But also, you would start dividing the world up like that everywhere. So, for example, you run into a Romani, a gypsy, right? Yeah. You're like, okay, they'll probably steal from me, but maybe not. I could be their friend, maybe, but maybe they'll steal from me. And what happens with that? And then you say, okay, I ran into a British person. He's probably going to drink all my tea, so I'll watch. Yeah. What happens is you start to become potentially, I think, so stereotypes, like with the dark elf, or maybe with an orc, like, okay, all orcs, you see an orc kill on sight, right?
Yeah.
But maybe there's a good orc, but...
Well, we have the whole song of Ushrad Bonebreaker from Cana de Profundis, which they actually have the line, which Oshrak says this, kill every orc on sight. He's actually, like, Oshrak is basically a Dritz, but he's an orc.
Right.
And he even tells the group of adventurers, he's cloaked figure, by saying, kill every orc that has ever drawn breath. Like, he's telling them orcs are nasty, orcs are evil. And then he explains through song how he's the exception, but...
So if you see, like, a bear in the woods, right? Yeah. Bears are very dangerous, but that doesn't mean you just shoot all bears you see, right?
Yeah.
Now the British might disagree, they shot all the wolves.
Yeah.
But so let's say with the orcs it's fairly simple, kill all orcs on sight.
Yeah.
Even the good orc says do it, right? But does that... Where am I getting at here? I think if you have confidence in that, then you start being overly confident, or maybe you don't even start, it's just by nature of being confident about that you should kill all orcs on sight or that all dark elves should be watched closely, what's the opposite of humility? Arrogance. You become arrogant.
Yeah.
Because you think, oh yeah, well I know what Chinese people are like. They're going to eat my dogs and they're going to steal all my jobs and they're going to make cheap products, right? Like you start, oh yeah, I know what this person's about, right? And there is in the world huge amount of variety in general, right? Like even the Valar, you'd say, oh, the Valar are good, right? They're these gods, and then there's Morgoth. And,
So, well, I'm not getting at you should be racist to orcs. That's just What I want to get at is 1D&D.
But should you not be like? It's kind of weird because now what you could say is that there's discernment, and you say, well, you'd be racist to orcs, but not to other groups, right? But like, okay, let's say real world right now. This isn't a fantasy world. This isn't Tolkien. You run into a vampire.
Yeah.
It's like, do you let them in your house?
By the nature of what a vampire is, I would not.
Yeah, right. Because the definition of a vampire is like this bloodsucker thing, right? But can you say the same thing? Like, well, that's what Romani do. They steal, right? Like, it's kind of the same thing in a way.
Yeah.
We have the stereotypes for a reason, right? That's the sort of... But, well, I think what maybe's going on is that mythologies are kind of platonic ideals in a way of a being.
Yeah.
Whereas realities are very messy and complex. Okay, the best example we have, besides the gypsies, is actually the Jews, right? Because the Jews, no matter where you look at media, they seem to rise to the top, right? You've got Jews in all the high-ups in the media. You've got all these special interest groups, all these money groups, the bankers. It's Jews, 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 right? And so that seems to be, if you were observant, you could say, okay, well, it's the nature of the Jews to be rich and powerful and greedy and money-grubbing. And maybe this goes back to the thing that Hitler did, right? Where Hitler had this very strong argument for Jews being evil.
Yeah.
But again, you say, okay, all evil people are Jews, but that doesn't actually tell you anything about Jews, right? Like, you could say it's in the nature of the Jew to be evil. That's not what you can determine from that, right? Yeah. So with an orc, and to be clear, that means... what I'm saying is that even if every single evil person on Earth and all the media was controlled by these conspiring Jews and they had this great big Jewish council, if you meet a Jew in the street, they might have no connection to any of that, right? Unless they have a hive mind or something going on. And it's the same with, I think, a group in the past that was probably kind of pure evil in the closest sense we could have was like the Aztecs.
Yeah.
Like, I think if any society on Earth was ever evil, it was the Aztecs. So, but if you meet a person who's descended from the Aztecs today, do they have this like heart of darkness in them, or?
So one of the things I want to look at with this is, so this, what you're talking about is all on the scale of humanity.
Yeah.
So have you seen the graph of a male voice ranges and female voice ranges?
Yeah.
And like it's bell curves.
Yeah.
And there's like a small intersect. And that's that's one of the very big differences between men and women is their bitches. But so we look at humanity across a large scale. There's definitely going to be differences between different people. And we can, but those bell curves are probably going to have a lot of interlap everywhere.
Yeah.
I think like a human and a halfling might have like a decent overlap with their bell curves, but there's still going to be a lot of differences. A human and elf is going to be a lot less of overlap.
Yeah.
A human and a dark elf, they're like going to be barely touching. A human and an orc, I don't think they even touch each other. And so...
But could you do the same with like a human and a black widow spider, right? Like, or a human and a wolf.
Yeah.
Like, there's like, you see a black widow, you kill on sight or something, right? But there's still probably black widows out there that are chill, right? Like, they're not going to all be the same. And so, does it seem wrong to just enact a genocide because they were born a black widow spider or something? Or maybe a mosquito is an even better example, right? Like, do you see a mosquito that's like 12 feet away from you? Do you like run over and smack it?
No. It's you build your walls strong and you make sure the orcs can't get in.
But if the mosquito comes near you and is buzzing in your face, you're like, wow.
Yeah.
You don't wait for the mosquito to bite you, but you also don't go and hunt it down.
And like even I've talked about elves, the immortal, they're weird, and halflings. I love Tolkien's description of halflings of they love books of knowledge filled with knowledge they already know.
Yeah.
Like And what I want to basically get to is that these differences, like they are different than us fundamentally. It's not a human with a different culture. Like they are a different creature. Like a cat. Like we've had cats tamed technically for a long time. A cat still, like, there's some cats that listen, some cats don't, but cats are quite diametrically different than dogs on a large scale. And so we could even throw orcs into there, but of course orcs have a longer lifespan, so they're hard to tame and change. So we could probably do it with goblins, because like goblins get to maturity at 8, so we could probably selectively breed goblins into being more human and more... But that, the eugenics aside, these aren't big humans with green skin and tusks. These aren't humans with white hair and gray skin that live underground. These are different creatures.
But how would you know? So the example I can think of in real life that happens all the time is pit bulls. Yeah. Right? People say, oh, these aren't your babies. These are a creature that could go off at any second, right? And people know. People know that pit bulls, they're just... They can snap at any moment, no matter how kind they seem, no matter how you raise them, no matter how much they're your baby. They're going to eat your child's face off.
Well, it's the same thing of the guys with the bears. Like, oh, this is my bear. I've like been with him for 20 years. Yeah. And at the end of the documentary, the guy got killed by his bear.
Yeah. But I think the pit bull people are wrong, right? Like, I don't think pit bulls are just going to snap and eat all the children, right? No. Like, maybe... I think pit bulls... I have a theory that pit bulls are susceptible to schizophrenia or something. Like, they see hallucinations, freak out, especially as they get older. So it could be something that does happen more often than not and you want to watch. But there's people that talk about, like, you should just kill all pit bulls. Like, people get freaked out about pit bulls as... And I think the reason they have bad experiences is probably also partly because, you know, a dog doesn't like it if you're freaking out around it, right? And so if you see a pit bull and you start going like, it's a pit bull, then you're going to make the dog...
it's an orc! I'll make you go, it's an orc. Thwack!
But well, with an orc, right? Like, how do we know that they are these heartless? Like, you see it, right? You're like, yeah, well, I saw a pit bull like tear apart someone, right? It's like, yeah, but does that actually tell you? And this gets into the I don't know if you've seen the internet meme. It's often on Reddit of source. Like people asking, and I've complained about it too, right? Because you can. This actually happened. There was a recent presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And Trump talked about how cats and dogs are being eaten, and he said he saw it on TV, and the newscaster said, no, the mayor debunked that claim. And neither of them are going to be communicating there, because what Trump is saying is, like, I don't care how many studies you have, I saw it, right? Yeah. And the newscaster is saying, I don't care what fringe weird video you saw. There's no proof. There's no actual there's no documentation whatsoever of this, right? What you have is people saying, I saw a video that we can't find anymore that showed me this, and it's like, okay, there's no proof, and that. So I think to survive, you know, if you look at the statistics, right, very few people are actually killed by black widow spiders, right? It's like, okay, yeah, well, I'm still not going to cover myself in black widow spiders, right? And if I see a person get bit by a black widow spider and die in front of me, I'm going to stay away from that thing, right? And so with the orcs, on the one hand, so racism is the simpler speciesism even, right? But racism is the simpler and empirically correct response in a lot of ways. But that raises all sorts of questions, doesn't it? So is a cosmopolitan society simply rationalism trying to force an unnatural order onto things, or is there nuance possible within humans and humans can actually get along? Because I think obviously humans can get along, and obviously you can meet people of a totally different race and be like, you look at children for this, right? They tend to be fascinated by each other, not freaked out. It's like, whoa, he's got different skin, different hair. What's that about? What's going on here? They're not like, oh, he's diseased or hideous. It's like, well, that's cool. Yeah. There's, what was that story? It was like this old woman, like old British woman, first time she ever saw a black boy or something. And she just fell in love with him. And he like, come over here. They're like talking, and it's this little black boy. And she pulled out a napkin, and she's just trying to like clean his face. Yeah. It's like you see a human and you don't necessarily, or you see a bear or a wolf, you don't necessarily go, that's a demon because it's different from me. You go, but I think what you also do is you make connections the first black person you see murders like your best friend in front of you. You're like, okay, those are demons.
Who's the guy who was like his female friend got raped and...
Oh, that was Liam Neeson.
Yeah, Liam Neeson.
The actor, yeah. Yeah, and he started walking around the bad part of town just hoping some black people would jump him so he could kill them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you see, because you make a connection, you're like, well, this is where the danger comes from, right? And it's not a... And so that's when the source actually has a point in a way, maybe, because it's like... But what's really going on is that source is saying, look, don't just blanket ascribe a characteristic to someone, which is the same thing that happens with... what's the saying? Poor people are just as smart as white people, right? That sort of thing. Where schools in Canada, at least, will have programs like for First Nations or minorities to help them through school. It's like, why not help poor people through school, right? And so I think they're failing there too. And what they're doing is they are too broadly applying. Oh, I went to this poor neighborhood and everyone there was First Nation, right? Yeah. And it's like, okay, yeah, but isn't the problem poor people, not First Nation people? Like, don't we care about poor people? No, I'm not saying don't help First Nation people. I'm saying help the people that need it. There's some rich First Nation person that doesn't need your money, and there's some poor non-First Nation kid that does need your money, right?
Yeah. And while you're trying to figure out if it's racist or not to attack orcs on sight, the orc horde has wiped out your city.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing is you have to make snap decisions sometimes, right? Yeah. Like, you see the Mongols coming, you go, well, maybe some of them are nice people. Yeah. No, you just start... The Mongols are a great example, actually. Mongols are basically real-life orcs, right? Like not modern Mongols, but the Mongol Empire at its height. And that's actually important, too, I guess. If the Mongol Empire is going around and pillaging and burning, Mongols are dangerous. Yeah. If the Mongols are a tiny little nomadic people that are kind of just another province of China, Mongols are just people that you don't have to, like, fight against on sight, right?
Yeah, and... I think the thing that is missed, though, with a lot... I don't know where it started, but the making orcs into big, muscly men and women, and one D&D making them Mexican, and, like, the dark elves getting along with other elves. And it's like, oh, it's just their culture, right? I think that actually takes a lot away from them.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think it's neat to have because... This conversation we're having, right? It's really interesting questions. And like Shadow of Am, it's really interesting with that dark elf. It's like, do you save her or do you let the people kill her?
Dritz is a super interesting character as well. Like, actually, he is a hero. Dritz is definitively a good man. He is one of the greatest heroes of the realm. And whenever he goes anywhere, people hate him on sight.
So it's a very complicated idea, right? Yeah. And the solution isn't to get rid of the complication, right?
Yeah.
The solution is... Well, the solution is let people have the difficult conversations, or let them. It's a game, right? And so I'm not saying games should be lesser, but if you're playing a war game, which essentially D&D is in a lot of ways, and you have to stop an angst over every group of goblins and orcs and skeletons you kill, it becomes pretty draining in a way, right? Like you just want to, like, imagine if you're playing Diablo and. Every 10 minutes your character has a breakdown because they've killed hundreds of thousands of...
Well, so in a campaign we played, this is minor spoilers for the Dungeon of the Mad Mage. There's a part in the Dungeon of the Mad Mage where you end up on a floor that's mostly controlled by a druid. And you go to her house and she tells you, okay, I can let you down to the next floor, but I want you to do something for me. There are these horrible... goblin werebats in my my dungeon floor. This is one of the few good dungeon floors in the whole Undermountain, because the Undermountain is nasty. Everything's being driven insane, but she's an insanely powerful druid. She can fight back against this power. She's saying, I just need you to make this place safe, because this is an infection that will spread. These goblins are killing all my animals. They're taking out the trees, these were-goblins. I need you to kill them for me. And so you go into their cave, and you start massacring them. And you go through their cave system and old ruins, and you wipe them out. And then you find their nursery. And there's a bunch of goblin weird children in there. And she told you to kill them all. And if you don't kill them all, she gets mad at you and will attack you. And we got there, and we were basically faced with... We didn't know that she'd do that. We were later told by our DM. And we're faced with a situation that there are these goblin children here. And so my character took the fall. And he went in there and he wiped out the goblin werebat children.
I don't know. Yeah,
And
it's a difficult thing,
and that kept getting brought up. Like, we went to a trial at one point, and the God of Justice was basically had our party on trial because the dungeon's really well put together. It's one of the bottom floors. You have to face an angel who's controlled by the God of Justice, and there's a whole trial. And he basically says, "You murdered children."
Yeah,
and you have to defend yourself.
Yeah, and that's interesting, right? It's complicated and it's interesting.
Yeah.
And getting rid of those difficult situations isn't the solution. There is like a lot of the progressive thing is the subjectivism and postmodernism where, it's difficult to actually call someone truly good or evil, right?
Yeah.
But they're not actually implementing that by getting rid of the like if you keep like all dark elves are evil except Dritz exists, then you're actually more strongly reinforcing that idea that not everyone's evil. Whereas if you say everyone's a coin toss, then it doesn't really mean anything. Oh, that was an evil dark elf. Yeah, so whatever. It's like
also from a role-playing perspective, if you can play a Dritz yourself, or you can play a Oshra, a Bonebreaker.
Do you think...
And I think that's a very cool character to play.
The sudden vitriol and hatred towards Russians with the invasion of Ukraine, like not just the Russian government but Russians, right?
Yeah.
I've seen people on completely apolitical YouTube videos, right, where they're talking about it's like, oh, it's like a video game review channel, and they're like, here's a cool video game, and then the comments will have people going, this is a Russian video game, it's terrible, it's horrible, right?
There's a cat breed called a Russian Blue. They're adorable. They got banned from cat shows and contests because their name is a Russian Blue.
Yeah, that's stuff like that is absurd, right? But do you think that the willingness to switch that fast is because if everything's a coin toss, then things can be good and evil? Yeah. Whereas if Russians are evil, but there are good Russians, like let's say Russians are dark elves, right?
Yeah.
So you can meet a good Russian, and actually Russians are pretty analogous to dark elves in some ways because
go on, how are they spider worshipping matriarchal psychopaths banished to the underground, separated from their immortal kin?
Okay, well, not Russians, but Soviets, like the Soviet Russians, because it's a very ideological society that even if you disagree with, you can't really escape.
Yeah.
Like Russia now, it's different, but the Soviets, I think,
yeah.
There was actually a bit of an overlap there. Like Dritz, even though he didn't like his society, he still had to be a cleric or whatever they make you do, right? Because he was because they have the male and female division.
Wizard.
Yeah. So they just said, yeah, you have to be a wizard, or yeah, because you're male, even though you want to be a fighter or whatever it is. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think the Russians do have that sort of analogy there.
He's a ranger.
But if we take, if you get rid of all of that, and then you run into a group of, oh, well, these orcs happen to be evil, then you can butcher them without remorse, right? I have a mod for Skyrim, which it has about a 5% chance to put a note on the corpse of a bandit. And so when you kill the bandit, you can pull it out and it's like, I hate this business, I'm getting out of here, I'm just saving up enough that this is going to be my last job. Or it's like, dear kid, I'm sorry I got caught up in this, I just broke out of prison, but I'm going to see you today. Like, it allows for that. If you and I think they might have done the opposite of what they were going for because now, if everything's a blank slate, then things can be cleanly good and evil.
Yeah. Well, one of the other things about orcs, this is in 4th edition as well, is so orcs are these sort of roving clans. However, every once in a while, there'll be a dark lord or evil wizard with a powerful will, and orcs just gather on those guys. And so he can have an army of orcs that are just drawn to him. And it's sort of to link it back to Lord of the Rings. Like, one of the other things, so at the end of Lord of the Rings, the Battle of the Black Gates, they are getting annihilated. The free men of the West are fighting the orcs of Mordor, the Seltherons, and the Easterlings. And they are getting annihilated. They don't stand a chance. They are ridiculously outnumbered. Then Sauron dies. Well, he doesn't die. The ring's destroyed. He loses all his power. His dark will is no longer driving the orcs. And they just scatter. Because they're basically, his will is pushing them into this. So from one partial expression, like you can have Gorbag and Shagrak up in the tower. And they might be like a little bit stronger, and his will isn't as much in them. They have a bit more free reign. But he's like focusing on Aragorn in that battle. And so all those orcs are basically filled with him. And they're going, we're going to kill, we're going to kill, we're going to kill. And so the orcs scatter, but I believe it's some of the Selderons just keep fighting because they hate the Man of the West. And even though all their allies are gone, it's like, we're going to stand and we're going to keep fighting until we die.
And it's like the leader of the Haradrim he's considered like a sort of honorable man in a way, right? Like, well, not honorable, but like admirable maybe. Like he's a great fighter. He's a brilliant general.
Yeah, well, Theoden killed the Red Serpent, I think, or the Black Serpent. So before Theoden died, they're basically having the battle in the Pelennor fields out front of Minas Tirith. And then Theoden sees the leader of the Selderons, I think, on his own horse. And so he calls his knights about him, and they charge. And he takes out their leader and his standard bearer. And that's a big victory for Rohan, is like the duel between the two kings.
Yeah, and they're the leader of the evil humans, like the Haradrim and the Selderons and the Haradrim. They're
well, they have many kings,
but their kings are like kind of equivalent to like a Boromir or an Aragorn. Like they're mighty fighters.
They're mighty men of powerful in arms with great honor. They just hate the West.
Mm-hmm. But like if you see
and even a part of that is if the Blue Wizards weren't in the Easterling's lands and they weren't in the Selderons, Tolkien basically said, "Oh, Gondor was being wiped out." The Blue Wizards basically stopped a huge amount of forces coming because they said, "No, the West isn't that bad."
Actually, regarding killing orcs on sight, there's the part where Faramir's Rangers kill the Southeron boy, basically. He was like 16 or 17.
Yeah, and he dies in front of Sam.
Yeah, and he looks at him and he's like, what did he think this is what his life was going to be? Is this what's he fighting for here? And but the answer is, and Tolkien went through war, right?
Yeah.
You don't just they're probably not bad people. They're just being forced to do it. There's the line in the animation of we don't want to go to war today, but the slave master says nay.
The Lord of the Lash says nay, nay, nay.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's because the answer, right, is, well, you fight them anyways because they'll kill you given a chance, right? But
there's a line in the movies as well as show them no mercy because they'll show none to you, and that's them talking about fighting orcs. But it's like, don't fight them with any honor.
But imagine a world where World War One, right? You got the Germans and the Brits facing off across the trenches, and both sides just Christmas miracle, right? Yeah. They just decide, no, we're not going to fight. Who cares what our leaders say, right?
Yeah.
Like, imagine if Faramir's Rangers come out and they're just like, hey, let's just play some soccer, and
Sam just gets to ride the elephant.
Yeah. Is that worth the risk? It's kind of and it doesn't seem to, like, is that when humanity redeems itself in a way, like in a sort of universal sense of like the Christmas miracle, World War One, that was, there's not many more beautiful stories than that, right? Like that's pretty amazing. But you do that 9 times out of 10, you just get killed, right? Like Faramir's Rangers, they jump out and like, hey, let's play soccer, and the elephant just stomps them.
Well, you try Christmas miracle, and unfortunately the people on the other side aren't British, they're Canadian.
Yeah.
Of the trench.
Yeah, exactly. And so they throw fake canned goods over to you as presents, and they're just grenades.
Yeah.
But that's the problem. It's the same thing with like you look at Brazil versus Canada or the United States, right? Less so, I think, maybe possibly now with Canada and the United States. But if everyone trusts each other and everyone doesn't try to cheat each other, society prospers, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in Brazil, everyone doesn't trust each other for good reason, and everyone kind of backstabs each other and tries to get ahead, and their whole society is brought down. But it's the right decision to make because everyone else is doing it, right? It's the prisoner's dilemma on a societal level. And you win if everyone just agrees with each other. But that's very hard to do. And it's kind of weird, actually. Like, Brazil makes way more sense. Like, how did, like, Scandinavian country... There was something... Is it, cold countries, you trust people or you die? Is that basically...
It might be it.
Because you essentially have to share... like, if you get a moose, you have to share with everyone because otherwise the whole society dies. I wonder if... There's a...
Well, so here's a question for you, going back to the cold countries and the kill on sight. You're a bunch of monks in a monastery, and a dragon-head boat shows up. You run away.
Yeah.
But they might be nice Vikings. You run away.
Yeah, you run away. I've been reading a bunch of First Nation stories recently, and one of them was about There was in Indonesia, there was a volcano that erupted, and this was in June in like the 1800s, like the start of the 1800s, around the Napoleonic era, I think, apparently. And the First Nations in Canada, I think it hit mostly Canada and maybe some of the United States, but they called it the year of the second winter, because it started snowing in June and it just became winter again.
Everything.
And tons of people died.
Yeah.
And because they had just eaten all their supplies, because, you know, any farming goods or foraging goods, like all your stores are empty because it's the start of summer when you're about to go hunt all the fresh stuff.
Yeah.
And then it all dies and there's a second winter. And the story was about he's a historical figure, Chief Isaac, I think is his name, sort of like he had his name was like Gawa Wish something, right? But, you know, his other name was Isaac something.
Yeah.
And he went out and he managed to get a moose, and he brought it back to his tribe, and he saved his whole tribe. And so there's a legend about this dude, and all he did in quotation marks was get a moose, right?
Yeah.
He got a moose that was like shaking down a squirrel's nest because the moose was trying to get food too.
Yeah.
And they said for the mushrooms in the nest, but I wonder, like, you're starving. Maybe the moose is going for the squirrels.
They do if they can. There's it was an unfortunate study.
Oh yeah, where they had the nets
to catch songbirds because they wanted to study the songbirds, and deer were coming along and eating them.
Yeah, but in the story, anyways, the moose is going for the squirrel's mushrooms.
Yeah. So
the moose is already desperate. It's like it's just depressing, no matter how you look at it. But this guy goes and he catches the moose. But the thing is, he didn't just he was up on a mountain, right?
Yeah.
He could have stayed there with the moose and eaten it all for himself, but instead he didn't drag the whole moose back. He took as much as he could, and he he took it back to the village, whatever the tense of that word is. He took
dragged.
He dragged. He dragged. That doesn't sound right.
It's correct.
He dragged the moose back to the village, and he made broth from what he could, and he fed it to the people until they had enough strength to eat the meat. And then that's a detail of the story. A lot of people died just from eating meat, which I don't know if that happens or not, but the fact that it's in the story makes me think maybe there's some wisdom in there you should pay attention to.
It's your stomach gets smaller when you're starving.
Yeah.
And
maybe like less able to digest stuff.
Yes, basically.
Yeah, because there was like they talked about like 2 or 3 people died from just they didn't want to eat the broth, they just wanted to eat the meat. And
yeah, basically, it's actually kind of horrific. What happens is, so your stomach's small, it doesn't have any acid in it, so you get something solid and large in it, you can't digest it, and the food literally rots inside you, and then you die of botulism or other things that's in there.
Or maybe like I've had like you're not used to a food and you eat it and then you get like stomach cramps. It's probably like that, I imagine.
And you're also starving, so you're really weak, so anything that's going to hit you is going to be brutal.
Yeah, and it probably hits you harder too. Like not just because you're weak, but because you haven't eaten so long. That so but he could have just had that all for himself, right? But so I think cold weather societies, maybe, you know, he has to give them the moose because next time there's a second winter, it'll be someone else that gets the moose and they'll bring it back. And that's the only way you survive as a society.
And if they were dark elves, he would have sat on the mountain and ate it all and then laughed because it's dark elves hate each other.
But then what that would have done is that means that next time there's a winter, he doesn't get a moose and he dies and everyone's dead now.
Yeah, and the dark elves would have seen, but other dark elves would have seen him be on the mountain eating that as he did the right thing.
Yeah, but all of them would have died.
Yeah.
Including the guy that did the selfish thing. Like, it's actually beneficial to share, right? And,
yeah, it's just dark elves are psychopaths.
But if you live in paradise, like you live near the border, like Brazilians, or the Spanish or something, maybe it's less necessary.
Yeah, well, dark elf society, they live underground, they're isolated, and they're slavers. They capture other people and make them work for them. They're also immortal, so besides killing each other, dark elves live forever.
So the dark elves, they have less reason to be trustworthy necessarily.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the way their society keeps its cap.
Dark elves get power, female dark elves get power from God, where they can literally summon food, and male dark elves study magic so they can conjure buildings.
Yeah, so they have a much more stable, rich society, which allows them to be less trusting and still succeed. So 2 of the other stories I was reading, one of them, it's just this very little detail, but it was strange. The way that, and the time periods aren't certain, but the Northern First Nations would greet each other would be that they would shake hands, like that was a greeting they did, which is interesting. It's kind of a universal symbol, it seems like. But they would have one hand, like they would have their left hand on their knife while they shook hands.
Yeah.
which seems kind of the opposite of what shaking hands is supposed to be out in a way. So obviously, like I said, they're this very trusting society, but obviously they're ready, right?
Yeah.
Like they have the knife at the ready. They're ready to go. There was actually, that reminds me of another story where there was this fight between two tribes, and like they just kept killing each other, and finally and it ruined the trade between them, which was making them both rich. So they're both collapsing basically. And so one of the tribes said, a few years go by, they haven't done any trade or anything. And one of the tribes is like, enough is enough. Let's send a trade caravan to them. We'll, make amends meet. We need to start the trade again because it was better for both of us. So they send this trade caravan out, and the other tribe learns of the trade caravan before it arrives. So they think, perfect, we can raid it. And so they go and they ambush these guys and like capture and kill them all. And it's like, man, that's nasty. So obviously, I say high trust, but there's still obviously a lot of warfare going on. So the other story, this is a story that's kind of all over the west coast of North America, like down into like California and stuff.
Yeah.
It looks like it might have been the same people, which is kind of interesting. But, descended from, like, separated by hundreds of years, but the same-ish people. It's of Raven and Beaver Man. And after the Great Flood, everyone was kind of, which also seems to have a historical basis, but there was this giant lake held in by an ice dam, basically, and then it gave way. But after the Great Flood, Raven and Beaver Man went around helping people, basically. And it would be a great, like, if you want to make a Skyrim game, like, make it about Beaver and Raven Man, because basically what they do is they go to a village, and the village says, we need help with something, and then they go and they solve it, and then they go to the next village, and like, it's basically quests, right?
Yeah.
And so there's tons of stories of them going around, and there's giant animals everywhere.
Yeah.
Like these giant wolverines and giant bears and giant owls, everything. And they're killing people or they're stealing their livestock, whatever it might be. And so Raven and Beaver Man go and they figure out what's going on and they kill these creatures. So the one story is they go to this village and they see it only has really old men, women, and children. And they're like, where are all your men? Where are all your hunters and men? And said they go up hunting and they never return. And so Raven and Beaver Man are like, the drawings I saw, Beaver Man is like a dude that wearing like a beaver cap, like it's a beaver tail on a hat. So I'm not sure, but he might be half beaver. I don't know.
He's just like Batman.
Yeah. Basically, yeah. Well, I was actually thinking about that. It's weird how in most cultures you have like Thor, Zeus, Odin, right? Like their names.
Yeah.
But then First Nation culture, it's always like, or African has this a little bit too, where it's like Gum Girl and Slayer of Monsters and Iron, like Bronze Giant. Like they all have these names that are like just very descriptive. But then superheroes also do that exact same thing, like Iron Man, Wonder Woman, Superman.
Also First Nation names, like that's the translation. But a lot of First Nation names, I know it's a stereotype, but it's like Running Wolf.
Yeah.
Or
but the other
Big Bear.
But it's strange because other cultures don't translate them, or they don't even know what it means. Like I was talking about Caesar, right? Caesar himself, like at the time, people didn't know what Caesar meant, and we're not sure if we believe Caesar about what he is.
Yeah.
But the First Nations, they can translate everything perfectly, which is maybe because of oral tradition. It's strange.
Yeah.
But so this one story, so they're like, okay, everyone's disappearing, so they go up to in the direction where all the hunters go, and they go on top of this big hill, and Beaver Man is like, there's something weird going on here. It's like, what? It's like, look at the ground. It looks wet or something. And it's summer, and they're like, what's going on? And so they reach down, and it's covered in ice. And they look, and the entire north face of the hill is just the ice. So if you step on it, you'll slide all the way to the bottom of the hill. What on earth? So they carefully go around the ice to the bottom of the hill, and there's a bunch of spikes at the bottom of the hill pointed. Like, someone's made some sort of trap here. Like, so who set this trap? And they're like, I don't know. Okay. And so they look at each other like, what do we do? It's like, well, let's figure out who set this trap. So they carefully lie among the spikes, and they start screaming. They're like, I've been stabbed. Right.
So is this Raven that stole the Sun Raven?
Yeah. But he's like a dude at this point, I think. Like,
they can just do, for most First Nation mythology, animals can just do that.
Yeah. They're just people.
Like, there's this story of a guy went into the woods, and he found a camp, and there's 3 wolves sitting around a campfire, and their skins were hanging up, and so there's just these 3 naked dudes. And the guy said, I'm really hungry, can you give me some food? And they freak out, and 2 of the wolves whip on their wolf skins and run off. But he jumps on the 3rd wolf and wrestles him to the ground, and so the wolf can't get his skin on. And so then he basically forces the wolf to take him back to his den so that he can feed him. And it's like the wolves are just hanging out, so they're not in their wolf outfits, so they're just these naked dudes sitting around a fire.
Yeah, so anyways, Yeah, it's just sometimes they're people, sometimes they're not, right?
Yeah.
And so Raven and Beaverman, they're pretending that they got impaled by this trap, and a giant Wolverine comes over, and he's like, "Oh, good, my trap caught some stuff." And so he picks them up, and he's like, there's a whole pretty crude story of them, like, trying to figure out if they're alive or not. And anyways, goes along, and they put him down. The Wolverine puts Beaverman and Raven down, and he goes to get the materials to cut them up.
Yeah.
And so they hop up and like, okay, there's a giant Wolverine. They go in the bushes, they hide, and they shoot him and kill him. And so they kill him. Then they find his wife and they kill her. And then they go into now. There's a few variants of the story. They find like the baby Wolverines, and they go and they try to kill them, but they run up a tree, and so they're trying to shoot them, and then they beg for their lives. Or another story is that they cut open the Wolverine's wife, and there's baby Wolverines inside her.
Yeah.
And so either way, they basically say to the Wolverines, all right, here's the deal. We won't kill you because you're just babies.
Yeah.
So like with the goblins, right?
Yeah.
It's like, what do? You killed the monster, the giant Wolverine, but what do you do with the babies? And so they say, okay, here's the deal. We won't kill you, but you're not allowed to grow anymore. Yeah. And so they basically go around the world shrinking all the animals.
Yeah, that's very common in First Nation. Like, that's how mosquitoes were made, is basically someone got cursed and was shrunk into a mosquito. That's actually one of the stories of Raven. This is, I think, Nunavut, which has slightly different view of him, or like the far north ice people.
Yeah, like the Inuit.
Is there's Raven used to be this giant monster bird, like kind of Thunderbird size, and he'd like hop along and murder people and stab them with his beak. And I think eventually a woman tricked him into jumping into a fire, and he like burned, and he shrunk down to this tiny little ball of ash. But Raven's this incredibly powerful creature, and so he starts to regenerate and pull himself back together. And she lays a curse on him, saying you have to be a small pile of soot for the rest of time. And so Raven flies off as this tiny version of himself because he's only allowed to regather so much because he has a curse on him.
It makes you wonder what was going on that made them say everything shrunk. I guess you see the bones of all the like giant sloths and whatnot, and there's something going on there. But the point being there, I guess, is that with Raven and Beaverman, the good thing to do, based on the story, right, is you go and you kill the giant animals because they're inherently evil. But that doesn't mean you slaughter their children, right?
Yeah.
Now, there might not always be a solution, right? Sometimes it's very difficult, right? But in this case, they say, we'll make you a deal. You're not allowed to grow anymore, and we'll leave you alone. And the Wolverines, actually, they negotiate. It's kind of funny. They're like, oh, okay, fine, we'll take your deal if we're also allowed to steal from humans whenever we want.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, fine, you're allowed to break into caches and steal from people. But
also, we get to be little psychopath tanks.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's impressive they took down the giant Wolverines.
Yeah.
But the
well, it's Raven and Beaverman, I mean.
Yeah. Name a more iconic duo since Batman and Robin. But I think the point there just that I'm bringing up is basically maybe you do kill the giant creatures, but that doesn't mean you become heartless.
Yeah.
So you see the dark elf and maybe you do shoot it, but you see their children, that doesn't mean you just slaughter their children, right?
Yeah.
You go like, okay, we'll see what we can do about them. Maybe you can't afford to feed them because they keep killing your own children or something, but maybe you go, okay, well, I don't know, we'll banish you and hope you survive. Like, it's never easy, but I think the solution isn't to make everything nothing. It's just to say, let there be these difficult questions.
Yeah.
That's how you explore. And this isn't just D&D, right?
Yeah.
This is actually, how do you live with wolves? How do you deal with racism? If aliens come down with a completely different moral system, how do we interact with them? Like if orcs from the 40k universe are real and we meet with them, is the proper diplomatic action to nuke them? And not because they're dangerous even, but because that's what they want you to do to them, because they love fighting.
I feel like you want to go the rogue trader approach with orcs.
Which is?
They trade with them. Right. But orcs' money is teeth.
Right. So you just start like punching orc teeth out. And
yeah, like rogue trader, there's...
That's Owlcat's latest game, right?
Yeah. But basically how the rogue traders deal with orcs, there's no orcs in the game, unfortunately, but in the actual like rogue trader sort of thing, is so orcs love nothing more than a good fight. But rogue traders are such good merchants and capitalists that they convince orcs that making money is funner than fighting. And so you have these orc ships flying around that are basically trying to interact with rogue traders, and the orcs are fighting each other to try to get loot so they can trade with the rogue traders instead.
Right. So you just you find a way that your cultures can interact.
So it's quite literally us trying to make China capitalist is what the
Right.
rogue traders successfully do to orcs.
You basically it's like the it's like the opium blockade that the British did almost.
Yeah.
But it's basically you find a way to make your cultures interact. Yeah. And so these are ideas that are worth exploring because it's not just...
When it comes to Tyranids, I think you have to wipe them all out because a single Tyranid can destroy a whole planet.
Yeah, and that's...
Like, a Tyranid is actually an existential threat. Like, sure, there can be a few wild Tyranids running about, but then a hive fleet gets a little too close, and suddenly they're sending a signal to the hive fleet. It's like, hey, there's a bunch of food here, and the hive fleet goes, oh, sweet.
But then you even get... like Ender's Game, right? The Speaker for the Dead, where you say, okay, even a species that tried to kill all humans is killing off an entire planet. Like, and, because it's not just, if you think about it, right, they call it xenocide, like other side, basically, but killing a whole planet, you're not just killing all the formics, right?
Yeah.
You're actually killing, like, how many species are on Earth? Like hundreds of millions? Like,
yeah.
You're just, and you're killing the legacy of the universe in a way.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, maybe that's too far. And that's what a lot of the books after Ender's Game are about. It's about, okay, there isn't really a way to make amends for the scale of destruction and what little can you do and what can you write about and talk about. And so even if we met the Tyranids, it does become an interesting question to think about, like, how much do you fight back against? Like, well, you should fight back with everything you've got, right?
Yeah.
But the question is, No. The answer is never give away your humanity.
That's the story of 40K, which a lot of people go, the humans are the bad guys. Like, you don't get it. The Empire are the bad guys.
Everyone's the bad guys.
It's not even that everyone's the bad guys in 40K. Yes. But humanity, that's the only thing they can do is what they're doing.
Well, I think this is actually World War II, right? This is a great example where the answer is you fight back. You fight against the Japanese. You fight against the Germans. You fight, right? But do not give away your humanity. And in World War II, they did. They collected the ears. They tortured the people. The Canadians didn't take prisoners of war. Whereas when you look at the British and the Germans with their air fighting, they kept their humanity. They fought each other because they had to, but they didn't give away their humanity. And now the Byzantines might disagree. They might say, do whatever it takes to win. But the Byzantines, they're not around anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, they did a good job. Byzantines are probably one of the more successful empires ever. So maybe like... what is the upper limit of a nation? Like maybe 500 years. So maybe the Byzantines did all right. But so and its length, like, I mean, the Romans, if you think about it, if you go from the founding of the Kingdom of Rome to, like, when was the Roman Empire officially dissolved? Like Napoleon, sort of, or maybe like you sort of. It's a very long period of time if you count it that way.
I say that it's the Americans are technically the inheritors of the Roman Empire, so it's still going.
No, it's the Finnish.
The Finnish?
Yeah, have I told you about this?
Probably, I don't remember.
So when the Byzantine Empire was in its last days, there was a Russian emperor who was obsessed with Rome.
Yeah.
And so he did everything he could and he had to work pretty hard at this, but he arranged a marriage between, I think it was his son and the last Byzantine princess. And so when Byzantine Empire fell, the Russians claimed that they had been the inheritors of Rome.
Yeah.
And, okay, so Russia's the inheritors of Rome. However, when the Soviet Revolution happened, they threw away all that was old, right? Like, they threw away their past. But the one sort of Russian dominion that resisted the Soviet overthrow was the Finnish, who refused to become part of the Soviet Union, and they fought back against it.
Yeah.
So the Finnish never lost a claim on Rome because they kept the original culture. And so Finland is the true inheritors of Rome.
Okay.
Yeah. I recently watched, about a month or two ago, Zom 100. And I think this is going to be, from now on, I think, spoilers for the whole first season of Zom 100.
Yeah.
If that works for you, yeah. And also spoilers for the 10 Rules of Pythagoras, which is not an anime. But I think Zom 100... But I think Zom 100 is worth watching. That's what I'm getting at, basically.
Yeah.
It's the second anime I've seen that I actually liked, I think. I think these spoilers, even if you listen to them, it'll still be worth watching because it's about the how they do it, but I think it's better without the spoilers. But
also, Zom 100 is visually...
It's pretty, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially the first episode.
Yes.
They get a bit more I'd say lazy, but it's not
They
really.
put their effort into the first episode to catch your attention.
Yeah, and it's not really lazy. The later episodes, they reuse a lot of stuff, but they don't. A way a lot of anime reuse stuff is they show the same thing, whereas they basically use it as a visual while they're talking, and the story is about the conversation they're having. So the dialogue is always moving forward. They don't reuse plot points. So they do the shortcuts better than most, I think.
Something also that didn't quite realize until recently about anime, on top of that, is a lot of anime comes from mangas, and a lot of mangas come from light novels. So first you have the light novel, which are sometimes well written, sometimes not so much. And then they transfer to manga, and the story actually gets lesser a lot of times when they go to manga. Even manga in general, like there's only so many details. And then anime, most of the time, actually adds more to the manga. They add more details, they add more story, they explain things more. So when it comes to like Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings, like, oh, so much got cut out. A lot of time when it comes to anime, they are adding stuff in because there's not enough material in a base manga to work with to make your anime.
Well, I think what I would like to see from anime, which I think could make all of them better, basically, is if they gave up on having like 20-minute episodes and they gave up on having like 13 episodes a season, and they just said, if it's 3.5 episodes, it'll be 3.5 episodes.
Yeah.
Now, that might not be sustainable money-wise, but I think maybe there are fans that do this. But let's say you took One Piece, for example, right? I imagine someone could come along and edit One Piece to the point where it was like half the length or less that it was. And then it'd be a much better watch as well.
Remember that Hobbit edit we watched?
Yeah, where it cut down the 3 movies into one. Yeah.
I was wondering if they could do that to Rings of Power. Cut it down so it only has lore accurate stuff in it.
I don't think that, like, even being lore accurate, I don't think really...
Well, and a good story. Like, trying to do that.
What's the giant glowing exclamation mark mean?
It means my phone's not plugged in.
On your computer?
Yeah, it's a bug I don't quite understand that's been occurring. Which is when I hook up my phone, and then even if I eject it, it gets pissed off at me that it's not plugged in.
Weird. Right, so, so I watched Psalm 100 and I really liked it, and I was reading... I don't know if this will work, but I was reading the 10 Rules of Pythagoras, and I wanted to quickly go over them. And then...
as quickly as you went over the full Communist Manifesto?
Well, this is only 2 pages, so, it's...
Well, Communist Manifesto was like, what, 10?
No, it's like 120 or something. So this will... Or maybe it's like 60. But anyways, this is shorter. I think they might overlap. And... if they don't, we'll just talk about Psalm 100 mostly. But I wanted to talk about the 10 Rules of Pythagoras. And then we talked about Pythagoras a little bit, I think, in a previous episode, where I basically had this issue where I was like, oh, should I say something? Should I not say something? And then I was just flipping through, looking for something else in this book, The Secret Teachings of All Ages. And I came across the... I
feel like this is one of the few books you can excuse using a highlighter or pencil markings on it.
I don't like that. Which is govern your tongue before all other things, following the gods. Which is to say that instead of representing you, your words misrepresent you, and when in doubt, say nothing.
That's funny, actually. That's really funny. I was at church 2 days ago. I was at Anglican church, and he's talking about the teachings of that one disciple, and he said, whenever you speak, govern your tongue above all things, because it is the most powerful thing that you have is your voice. And whenever you think that you're going to speak a lie, imagine a bottle of poison, because that's what you're drinking when you lie.
Yeah, so it's definitely a lesson that was agreed upon. And possibly they took from Pythagoras, because Pythagoras, or someone else, Pythagoras, for a bit of a background on him, like beyond the whole Pythagorean theorem, right? Pythagoras isn't the guy that actually developed the Pythagorean theorem, probably. He was I guess you would call him a scholar. He went around to a bunch of different secret societies and sects and mysteries and religions. And he joined all their, he joined the Illuminati, he joined the Masons, he joined the Lizard Men, he joined...
The Flat Earth.
Yeah, he joined Scientology.
Yeah, he joined the Round Earth Conspiracy Cover-Up Group.
Yeah, so he went to all these people, and he swore all their vows of secrecy, and then he went and he taught everyone. But he actually didn't break his vows, I believe, because I don't know how he phrased it exactly, but it was something like, no one will ever see me reveal these secrets. And so he'd teach all his lessons behind a curtain, right?
Yeah.
And so apparently that counted for whatever reason. And so he gave all these secrets to the world. But to become a Pythagorean, you had to it wasn't easy to get into his order. You had to be inducted like all these other secret societies. But for him, you had to not speak for 5 years. That was the main one. And it was to teach you the value of words and not speaking. And so the fact that it's rule number 2 instead of 1, I think is kind of interesting on its own. But yeah, it was good advice because I held my tongue and then the thing resolved itself. And I was like, oh, yeah. And anything I would have said would have made the situation worse, basically. So I was like, okay, yeah. Be very careful when you're speaking. So yeah, here's the 10
commandments by...
Actually, this book claims... so there was 39, apparently, it says here. But these are 10 of the most representative, it says.
Yeah.
So, number 1, declining from the public ways, walk in unfrequented paths. And so if you want wisdom, you have to be alone. That's what this says.
Yeah.
Like, it's not saying take the path less traveled type. It's more like go where no one else has gone.
Yeah.
That's where wisdom is. And also you will be alone if you're seeking wisdom. You know you're doing something right if everyone isn't there. I guess. Or well, this not necessarily right? Like, depends what you want to achieve, right? Because if you want to be around people, then obviously you want to be where people are. But that's not where you're going to be finding wisdom. Now, I'm not sure if I agree with that entirely. I think there's wisdom for interacting with people.
Yeah.
But other kinds of wisdom, yeah, you do need to be willing to... It's kind of the same thing that Jordan Peterson talks about with the Knights of King Arthur, where to find the Grail, you have to go into the darkest part of the woods, right?
Yeah.
You have to go where no one travels. You have to be willing to be... You have to take fear into your heart and go on your own. I read this book called Dare recently about anxiety, and it's about the Dare method, which is diffuse. So you go... so let's say you're feeling really anxious. You go, oh, it's just anxiety. So that's diffuse. And then accept is you go, okay, I accept this feeling. You know, it's just this little monster nammering on my shoulder, like, yeah. Okay, I'll feel it fully. And then R is run towards. So you go, yeah, this feeling excites me. Yeah, I'm ready to go. I want more of it. Come on. You think I'm about to throw up in traffic because I'm so like anxious or scared? Yeah, come on, try to make me throw up. Go for it. Come on, do it. And so that's run towards, and then embrace. The final one is engage. So that's the E. Yeah. And so engage is once you're feeling it fully, and you're like, yep, come on, give me your best shot. You then let it keep flowing through you, and then you just do something else. You engage with something else. But he said you engage, you don't distract. So the difference is that with engaging, you're doing what you wanted to be doing already.
Yeah.
Distraction is you go, oh man, the anxiety. Okay, I'll just have to. I'll just play a quick game of ping pong or something to get. No, it's like if you're going to play ping pong, go play ping pong. Yeah. But don't do it just to distract yourself. Do it because it's what you wanted. So you're driving. I'm going to engage with my driving. That feeling's still going to be there, but I'm still going to drive anyways.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, that's actually...
I feel anxious. There's an orc horde at the gates.
Yeah, so whatever. If they kill me, I don't have to go to work tomorrow. That's diffuse. Okay, and then you go, accept. Okay, I'm going to feel the feeling of fear. Just let the fear run through me. And then run towards... Yeah, I feel like I'm going to faint. Oh, yeah, come on, try to make me faint. Let's go on. I'm excited. Yeah, okay, bring me the fear. And then engage. You're like, all right, I'm going to fight anyways. I'm ready here. Yeah, and so that's how you do it, basically. And I was thinking, that's how you digest negative experience, essentially, is what he's saying.
Yeah.
That's going to chaos, or it's the same thing as the hero's myth, but... It's actually, I don't know how you do it exactly, but in D&D, your XP pool, right?
Yeah.
You know how you had to get a trainer in like 2nd edition?
Yep.
So your XP pool is your anxiety. And then feeling all that anxiety and fear, you're converting it into levels. Like, so every time you're like sitting there and you're like, yeah, I'm going to let myself feel fear and anxiety and distress. And that's actually you leveling up. Like that's, and that's actually like you converting experience into levels, because that's the only way you can actually level up is to actually integrate your experience, right? Yeah. I sound like one of those influencers, like you got to level up your game, but I mean it in the much nerdier sense. Okay, yeah. So it counts. Right. So yeah, govern your tongue before all things, following the gods. So your words misrepresent you instead of represent you, and when in doubt, say nothing. 3. The wind blowing, adore the sound. So God is heard in the voice of the elements, and in all things nature manifests through harmony, rhythm, order, procedure. The attributes are the attributes of the deity. So this is, I think, similar to dark magic, right? Mm. You force something to happen, you're like, you got it. No, you just sit back and listen, and the answer's there.
Yeah.
As plain as can be. 4.
A squared plus b squared equals c squared.
I wonder. Yeah. 4 is assist a man in raising a burden, but do not assist him in laying it down. So if someone, they're like, I'm ready to learn, then aid the diligent, right?
Yeah.
But if they're trying to avoid their responsibility, they're like, oh, I don't want to carry this, do it for. It's like, no, I will help you have more work.
Yeah.
If you're ready for it, but I'm not going to take your work away, which is similar. So when I'm doing the archery instruction right now, right? When I see someone struggling with the target trying to pull the arrow out, it's like, okay, if they actually can't get it because they're a little kid and it's like 6 feet off the ground, I'll get the arrow for them. But if they're just being lazy, I'm going to sit there until they pull it out, right? Because it's like they have to learn how to do it.
Yeah.
And so it's that same idea. And we've talked about this a lot with like, we can give you the weapons to fight the monsters, but we can't fight them for you. Yeah. So it's all about, and also like the man virtue versus woman virtue, right? It's like, let me do that for you versus let me help you do that and that sort of thing. Yeah. Okay. 5, speak not about Pythagorean concerns without light. The world is herein warned that it should not attempt to interpret the mysteries of God without spiritual and intellectual illumination. So that's when you get into, that's dark magic again, right? That's where you say, 3 is the sacred number. So if you say 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, then you're going to be super lucky. And it's like, no, 3 is a sacred number for a reason, but you don't just get to, that reason is to teach you, right? Alchemy is not about creating a potion. It's about creating yourself. It's about improving yourself.
You are the Philosopher's Stone.
So don't just give away. So if you give away the knowledge to someone that isn't paying attention and they're like, oh yeah, just give me the secret to make gold. It's like, no, that's not the point. Yeah. You have to be the Philosopher's Stone, just like you said. So yeah, little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Basically that. 6, having departed from your house, turn not back, for the Furies will be your attendants. So if you start on the search for truth and you become discouraged and you try to return back to, you're like, okay, this wasn't worth it. I'm just going to go back to the way I was.
Yeah.
That'd be way worse than having never left at all, right? It's like, you have to stick to the path once you start. Otherwise, it's going to be hell trying to return to the way you were before. It's better to know nothing about divinity than to learn a little and stop. That's what it says here. Yeah. Nourish a rooster, but sacrifice it not, for it is sacred to the sun and moon. That is not what it says, but this is YouTube, so. So, don't kill living things for the gods, because life is sacred. You don't destroy it even as an offering.
Yeah.
That's what that lesson is. And then the second is that the human body is the rooster in this case. So don't... and so you are sacred to God and nature, sun and the moon, and therefore you should not kill yourself, basically. Like, you are sacred.
Don't sacrifice yourself.
Yeah. Don't cut yourself. Don't kill things just for the... Dark magic again, right?
Yeah. Well, there's that level of sacrifice, but I think it might even be deeper sacrifice of don't tear yourself.
Well, it's kind of saying that, but it's saying you have value, right?
Yeah.
So don't just you're like, oh, I'll do this for God. It's like, no, God doesn't want you to destroy yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. God doesn't want you to destroy in his name.
Yeah.
Yeah. Receive not a swallow into your house. So basically, this is one of his most important lessons. Swallows will make a mess. Like, have you seen those nests they make?
They're like made of spit, basically.
Yeah. So this one is... I don't know if I agree with this one, actually. Basically, don't let fleeting thoughts just sort of dance around your mind, and let people enter your life who are chaotic and shiftless. And now, the one about people, sure, that makes sense. Like, don't allow shiftless people. Don't allow people who are
I
wishy-washy or...
I think it's in Jordan Peterson's second list of rules, but it might be in his first, which is basically it's be friends with people who want the best for you. Like, don't
just be friends with people who are or don't let people into your house who are just there to dance around and be interested about some little thing, like oh, you have alchemy, I want to see the alchemy set. And it's like, for example, something like that. It's like, no, you bring in the people who you can discuss it with, and actually but that doesn't mean all your friendships must be these deep philosophical things. It's more like what would you say, like you said, don't be friends with people who don't care the best about you, or who are just there to be there on a dalliance. They're like, oh, this guy's so quirky, I want to see what he's about, right?
Yeah.
People who aren't there because...
Or they're just a friend because they're your friend, and it's...
Or they're not seeing the divine in you, maybe. Yeah. And I guess one of the ideas, the way I would interpret that in the most charitable way to my own beliefs, would be, like, receive not the swallow into your house. It would be just because you think something doesn't mean you have to believe it.
Yeah, well, don't receive it. You can see a swallow outside. You don't have to bring it into your house.
Yeah, so it's like, oh, what if the Jews are all actually evil, as we were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah.
It's like, you can see the swallow, but don't just bring it in because you thought it. Like, you can think things and not believe them.
Yes.
And, yeah, well, yeah. It is funny, though, like, yeah, go on to the next one. But, I think that also ties into kind of the opposite of that is when someone says, I think this game might not be that good because of, like, your Dragon's Dogma video, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it might have these problems. And then people become afraid of the swallow, that, oh, this might be bad. And they don't want to house it, but they become almost extremely afraid of it to the point where they're shooting swallows that are, like, on the other...
They're leaving their house to kill swallows.
Yeah. Instead of, like, okay, is that a good swallow or a bad swallow? Okay, no, that's... And they could think, okay, that's a bad swallow, I'm not going to let it in. But you don't have to start going crazy and, like...
That's the same thing with the orcs.
Yeah.
Is, you don't have to kill the orcs, but it doesn't mean you open your gate to them.
Yeah.
It's like, alright, there's this...
And if they try to force themselves into your house, you start blasting.
Yeah, there's this marauding horde of orcs outside. We're not opening our gate to them, but we're also not sending the knights out to kill them. We'll just let them maraud about outside
But if they come to the gate, we're going to start killing, you better believe. Yeah. Okay. Offer not your right hand easily to anyone. So this is kind of related to the one where, not talking, right? It's basically, don't just offer wisdom and knowledge to people. And now the difference with this one is instead of it being because you're an idiot and you don't know anything, this one is more because people... They're not going to appreciate it. It's not going to...
Also, don't offer unsolicited advice.
Yeah. And the hand here represents truth, which raises those who have fallen because of ignorance. But if they don't want the wisdom, they're going to cut your hand off that you extend towards them.
So that's a little bit of pearls before swine as well.
Yeah, exactly. And it says, the only way to redeem the ignorant masses is time.
I think I was like probably 19 when I actually figured out what pearls before swine meant.
Oh, yeah?
Which is, a pig's not going to care if you have like a handful of pearls. It's just going to go oink and then go back to wallowing in mud.
Yeah. Even though pearls are beautiful and transcend. Yeah.
It's a pig.
Yeah.
It wants to eat an onion.
It might eat the pearls.
Yeah.
Pearls are edible, I guess, sort of. So.
Yeah.
This line here is actually interesting. This is kind of an addition, but time alone can affect the redemption of the ignorant masses. So that's when this could apply a lot to online discourse where you say, why are all these people being so stupid? Clearly things should be this way. It's like, now obviously having a discussion is going to slowly move the needle and change society, right? Like or maybe not having a discussion, but a discussion alone is enough. But developing the idea within yourself would it will, no matter what, whether it's a positive or negative idea, will slowly change the world around you. Right?
Yeah.
And so you're not going to go to someone and say, you need to be a communist right now. Instead, you just have to live virtuously as a communist, and then society will change.
You just said something that's not possible.
Well,
that's an oxymoron.
But if you do live virtuously as a communist, then you will bring about beautiful communist world, ideally, right? Like, if you can live as a virtuous communist, then you want people to be virtuous communists, right?
Yeah. I don't know if you can be virtuous and a communist.
Right, but the point being, it doesn't matter. The point being, if you can, then that's good, right?
It's like being a virtuous murderer.
Like Dexter. Yeah, but the point is that live in virtue.
Yeah.
And if that virtue is communism, then so be it, right? Like, whatever the outcome of virtue is. And it'll probably be something, who knows? But it'll be more complicated, probably.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, 10. This one's odd. When rising from the bedclothes, roll them together and obliterate the impression of the body.
That's hard. I leave a dent where I sleep. I don't move, and so my beds just slowly form a dent over time.
Well, you got to use bedclothes instead, right? No mattresses. That's the.
Apparently so.
So this
probably
one
sounds better in the original Greek.
So this one is basically if you've awakened from the sleep of ignorance. So once you become woke, don't Well, yeah. What he's saying is once you've become intelligence and you're aware of whatever wisdom you've received, however small it might be, right? Eliminate from your recollection all memory of your former spiritual darkness.
Don't leave a groove for you to crawl back into.
For a wise man in passing leaves no form behind him, which others less intelligent, seeing, shall use as mold for the casting of idols. Okay, so with this, so Jordan Peterson, when he was younger, was an alcoholic, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So you look at him and you say, okay, there's an admiral. Let's say you admire him, as many people do, and people used to, especially. I think now it's kind of more mixed, right? But you admire him and you say, okay, So Jordan Peterson was an alcoholic. Therefore, I can keep drinking because, that's he. If he did it, then it'll work for me, right? So that's why you eliminate the past. You don't say, my road is the road to wisdom. You say, wisdom is where you want to be. You have your path to it, right?
Yeah.
So you don't... So your story doesn't give the path to wisdom. That would be an idol. Instead, it's the continual seeking of wisdom that matters. And you telling your story saying, I was seeking wisdom the whole time would be what matters. But he's saying, don't even, eliminate from your recollection all memory of their former spiritual darkness. In passing, leave no form behind them which others less intelligent seeing shall use as mold for casting of idols.
Yeah.
So don't even say, I was a drunk and now I'm like this, so you can too. Like,
yeah.
And maybe, I wonder if that would even apply in Pythagoras' mind to not talking about your past. Like, don't even say, I was a poor man and then I
Don't
Pythagoras...
speak a word about your loss from
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who you were, it's who you are.
Or it's the point, not even, but it's also like the point you're moving towards, right? It's like, here's our goal, and you will have your own path there. My path is, but I wonder, like the,
well, it's also not...
bet it all in one round of pitch and toss and never breathe a word about your loss, right? That line, I think, in a way it means, don't whine and complain about you took the risk, it's on you, right? Don't whine and complain about it. But on the other hand, it doesn't mean that you can't say, I fell down 12 times before I got here. Like, I don't know. That seems like that would be a positive thing to say in a way. But as long as people understand that the point is not that you should fall down, but that you should keep getting up.
Yeah. The other thing with that is the not casting of idols. So that is the finger and not the moon.
Yeah.
It's trying to avoid that.
But I wonder, like...
You look to the moon, not the finger. And
you don't want to maintain... I don't think you should be maintaining an image that you're, like, perfect, though, right? Like...
No. I think not everyone's a winner.
Yeah. But like, you shouldn't... I don't think hiding that you've struggled is... Like, maybe don't just say, like, oh, yeah, you got to struggle.
It could also be that maybe he might have known something we don't. Like, maybe he tried to talk about his past, and, like, 9 times out of 10 it was fine. But that 10th time really screwed him up with, like, what he saw it do to people. And so he's saying, I can't even have that.
But it's, like, all his teachings in total sound like he would be very disconnected from others, right? Like...
It sounds quite similar to the disconnecting yourself from all worldly desire of the Buddhists.
Yeah, but I wonder, like, if Pythagoras had any friends. Like...
Well, he lived behind a curtain teaching people math. I don't think... He had all that many friends.
And I don't just mean friends, like, I don't like the reduction of friends to people to lean on and to complain to, like, but I think, like, friends can be someone that you exchange ideas with, like, with, like, Pythagoras and his students could be friends in theory. But if, after the lessons you go with Pythagoras and you're like, oh man, I love this mountain, and Pythagoras could say, oh yeah, I grew up on, like, but instead he's like, no, I'm not going to tell you about my past. Isn't that an idol in of itself? It's like just the wisdom dispenser that doesn't speak, like, about himself. Like, maybe, like you said, Pythagoras found that is actually the best way for humans to interact, is just as their best possible selves and never
read
in the present.
Don't read the interpretation, just read because that's the interpretation. Like, read the direct.
When rising from the bedclothes. Okay, so when you awaken to... when you awaken
just
to divinity.
Just the whole thing.
Yeah, okay.
I'll explain my thought on it.
When rising from the bedclothes, roll them together and obliterate the impression of the body.
So...
also, the past still exists when you roll them together.
Yeah.
It's just your impact on it isn't...
But also, one of the things I think about is, let's go back to my joke about my bed having that dent in it.
Yeah.
So... I have a problem with spring beds, actually.
Yeah.
And it's a problem spring beds had, which is I don't move much when I sleep. And so if you sleep in the same spot on the same springs over and over again, the springs will wear down and it will leave an indent. And that indent's curved, it's not a flat surface. And so when I lie there, I get stiff and uncomfortable. But it's a very easy mold to roll into because it's like in the center of my bed. So I slip into it. It's a very easy mold to lie in. So it could partly also be of you have this old version of yourself. As I said, you've woken up from it. You're woke now. Or you've woken up from the old mold. and so roll it together, and so destroy the imprint you had, so you can't actually crawl back into that hollow, that mold.
But you don't get rid of the bedclothes,
Yeah.
I guess. Every time you put your bedclothes out for sleep,
Yeah.
it's a fresh. You're like, I am a new person. This is
Yeah.
my fresh start. So it's basic. You could that way. It's kind of like like we talk a lot about cluster B. It's kind of the let your ego be rebuilt every morning with like take an assessment of yourself every day, and that's who you are now, right?
Yeah.
Like put your bedclothes down, and that's your new bedclothes. And yeah, the way I would look at it would be that was yours, and then mine. I think it's something along the lines of the bedclothes. Yeah, the bedclothes still exist, so you are. And you're rolling them together, so it's kind of like you remove your impression of yourself on the past, but you still have your past, which is the bedclothes. So you don't say, "Oh yeah, you got to work hard. You got to work 5 hours a day, 12 days a week," or that was my past, and look at me now. Instead, you say. Someone comes to you and they say, "Oh yeah, you grew up on that hill." It's like, "Yeah, I grew up on that hill," because the bedclothes still exist. But you don't say, "And I carved out this. It used to be tiny, and I made it this great big thing." Like, but yeah, I like yours better. I think actually.
So another thing is back in the olden days when Pythagoras was around, rooms were really simple. It's like you had a chair, you had a table, and like you had like one set of clothing, and you had your bedclothes, right? And so the really only way a room could be messy is if you had your slept-in bedclothes. So Pythagoras was telling everyone to clean their rooms.
Yeah. Roll your bedclothes so there's no impression of your body. Yeah, could be too great.
Clean your room.
But I think your mold, right? Your the impression of your body. That's really important because basically it's saying, you still have your past, the bedclothes, but you don't cast yourself.
Yeah.
In that role, you say, okay, here's my past, but that means nothing for the present.
Yeah.
I will sleep on the bedclothes however I sleep on them, whatever is most comfortable to me. I won't just sleep in it because that was the past.
Yeah.
And when others come and look at my bedclothes and they go, "Oh, that is how you sleep," it's like, no, I sleep how is best every night.
Yeah.
So they don't get that impression. So, but what does that mean? Well, I guess
it prevents the false idol because you see the indent, and so you try to copy it. You don't understand. Like you're a Pythagoras, right?
Yeah.
Giant Giga Chaz, huge chin, rippling muscle Greek fella, right?
Yeah.
And so he gets up, he forgets to throw his bedclothes one night, right?
Yeah.
And so he's like sleeping in the Zeus pose, the one hand up the air, one hand on the shoulder,
Yeah.
sort of like that fluxing thing. And so this tiny Greek woman comes in, and she sees that, and she knows that Pythagoras is this amazing guy.
Yeah.
So she wants to sleep the same way he does. Now, Pythagoras is sleeping like that because that's what's just most comfortable for him that night, and that's what worked for him comfort that night. So she lies down like that.
Every night. Yeah.
Not even every night. Like, she can copy him every night, but she's not Pythagoras.
Yeah.
It's not... Now, if you listen to his lessons, he's like, sleep how is most comfortable. It's not...
But what does it mean to obliterate, like, in terms of, okay, day to day? So what does Pythagoras do to roll up his bedclothes? So someone comes to him and says, oh, okay, how about this? Someone comes up to him and says, I want to learn how to ride a horse. How do you ride a horse? So what does Pythagoras do to obliterate his clothes and that? He says, so what he does is he says, you've got to get to know the horse, and you've got to get on top of that thing. Right. He doesn't say, well, what I do is I put my leg up.
Yeah.
And so he doesn't tell you the step-by-step manual. So basically, if I'm interpreting this right, modern school system is not something Pythagoras would like.
No.
He does not give you the step-by-step manual. He instead says, here are the circumstances under which you yourself will learn to ride a horse.
Yeah, my physics teacher had a mental breakdown in class because he basically was asking students questions and they were giving him the textbook answer or whatever. And while it's correct, he's like, no, I don't want you to give... I'm trying to teach you how to think. He had the breakdown, and I think that was a partial failure on his part in compared to my new media teacher in university, where he had the same class, where he asked the questions. He didn't give up, though. He didn't have the breakdown. He's like, no, you are going to learn to think, or we are going to be in this classroom all day, and we are going to stay on the same question until we get through it.
But the sad part is it's not really the student's fault, right? Yeah. Like, it's not... like, school punishes thinking until you get to about university.
Yeah.
Like, first or second year university, school punishes thinking. And even now, some classes in university, they don't...
Yeah, that That new media teacher, though, was like an amazing teacher.
I've run into people who are like, pretty smart. They're like physicists and whatnot. And when you talk with them and it's weird. You can have like these really deep, interesting conversations with them. And then you step a little outside the bounds and it's like they shatter. It's really strange. I was having a conversation with a guy about, he was saying, do you think there'll ever be a cure for cancer, for instance? And I said, there might already be one. And he's like, oh, great, conspiracy. We landed on the moon, okay, we're having fun right now. And we're joking, right? Yeah. It's like, oh, yeah, well, can you prove we landed on the moon? So can you prove you're breathing air? Well, you hold your breath, you stop breathing, you can put your head underwater, you can't breathe, you can blow up bubbles. So you can demonstrate to a human that you're breathing underwater, but you can't, but how do you prove we were on the moon? It's like, well, people, the institutions that we trust say we are. At some point you have to trust whoever said it. It's like, no, you don't, because you can shine a laser at the moon and there's a mirror on the moon that you can bounce back and look at, or you can look at the Chinese 3D model of the moon that matches up with the video, or you can. Now, I'm just saying this. You're taking my word for it right now, but if you can go and do that and you can prove or disprove me with that, I'm giving you tools that you can use to prove or disprove me. And the Russians never disproved it, which is pretty big on its own. Yeah. So there's a few things like that.
You can look at the footage and then it's like, oh, it could be faked, and it's like, I mean, I could be wrong, but from my experience with some filmmaking stuff, it might be harder to fake it than actually land there.
It probably was, otherwise they would have faked it. That's my theory. But that said, I don't think that one's convincing because I can't personally tell you that something's wrong with the footage, the moon footage, right? Like I've heard that the lighting is far too intense, even under the strongest studio lights. But how do I test that myself? How do I figure out what the strongest studio lights look like, right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing is that the dust moves in straight lines instead of arcs. And so it's like, okay, but maybe that's because they messed up the CGI. Like, how do I know what the gravity's like on the moon? How do I test that myself?
How do you know? Maybe we had hidden CGI technology that was better than we thought.
Yeah. Or like, I told you this the other day. I was like, after doing a little bit of animation, I was like, I'm pretty sure with enough patience, you can basically animate anything.
I don't think you told me that.
Okay. Well, yeah, but I think it's possible to fake basically anything with animation, right? Like you just do it step by step and you just take your time and you can basically make anything happen as long as you're slow enough.
Maybe.
But then what happened in that conversation is the guy said, let's see, this was the moon landing. And he said, yeah, but why would they have faked it? Like, nobody would have tried to fake it. If they had faked it and found out, then it would have been a disaster. Like, they had no reason to fake it, right? Because he said, what you have to look at about conspiracies, what he said, this is true, but what he said was, okay, look, the moon landing isn't fake because the thing that you have to look at with conspiracies is that they have to have a reason to do the conspiracy, right? And there's no reason to fake the moon landing, which this guy has never read a history book in his life, I think.
Yeah, well...
So I said, okay, so unfortunately I forget the name right now. I think it was called Zond 5.
Yeah.
So the Russians sent out a probe called Zond 5,
which
was full of turtles, and they sent it around the moon.
Yeah.
And they wanted to see basically, because they knew there was radiation in space. And they're like, okay, does radiation like kill things, right? Yeah. And so they sent the turtles around the moon, they brought them back to Earth, they looked at the turtles, they cut them open. And the turtles lived the whole trip, but then they got cut open again. But they only lost a little bit of muscle mass. They didn't seem to be poisoned by the radiation. It turns out that reptiles are basically immune to radiation, so it was a terrible test. But well, they're not immune, but they're way more resistant than humans, especially turtles. So it wasn't a very good test. But what they also did was they had a transmitter on this Zond spacecraft that had they got 3 of their Russian astronauts to do a recording of telemetry data where they said, all right, we're approaching the moon, we're coming by here, and okay, we're going at 500 kilometers an hour, and now we're going at 30. Okay, temperature, pressure is... So they gave telemetry data beaming from the satellite. So when the Americans were spying on the satellite, they're like, there's 3 Russians in there, and they're almost about to land on the moon. What's going... So the Russians were actually faking a moon mission.
Yeah.
And so there's tons of reason to do it. There's so much reason the Russians did it. Now, the Russians claimed it was a hoax. They were having a bit of fun.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, we wanted to scare the Americans. And maybe that's true, but do you think if the Americans had believed it, they would have admitted it was a hoax? Like, the Americans like, oh, wow, we lost. And they're like, oh, no, you didn't lose. Don't worry. We were just faking. Like, I think if they could get away with it, they would have.
Yeah.
And so that with the moon landing, I'm pretty sure the moon landing did happen when it did because of, like I said, the laser. And not that I've tested the laser or not that I've looked at the Japanese, but the fact that there is a lot of things I could do to test it alleviates it enough for me that I don't care enough to do the rest, right? Especially the thing where the Russians didn't disprove it. But if I want to be sure, I should go and do those things.
Yeah.
But, there's only so many things you can do in a lifetime. So it's like,
Yeah.
It doesn't affect my life that much either way, because like if I say actually the Soviets won the Cold War, does that really change anything?
Well,
But where was I going with this? The
first breaking.
right, no, I think that if the Americans could have faked it, they would have basically.
Yeah.
But I don't think they could have.
So he just couldn't really accept that.
Well, he just sort of started, oh, you're crazy conspiracy theorists. Yeah. You know, like people sort of fall apart when
So
you start. It's the same thing if you try to talk about like, you know, Hitler had a lot of good points. People go like, whoa, you're evil, you're crazy.
well, yeah, another thing makes people fall apart. Bigfoot.
Yeah.
I was a little disappointed in Bob Gimlin when he was talking to Joe.
Oh yeah, they brought a Bigfoot researcher on to talk about politics.
Yeah, well, part of it was that Bob was very nervous.
Yeah.
And like,
I hope he goes on again.
yeah, well, one of the things that happened there was, so Joe asked him, "Are they covering up?" And Bob said, "Yeah, I think people are covering up. That's what you can't find." And then
Joe said why.
why, and Bob kind of fell apart.
Yeah.
But he actually explained it in one of his videos, and I think this is one of the most reasonable reasons why Bigfoot get covered up. I'm going to get rid of it's a interdimensional space ape. I'm going to get rid of the links to aliens. I'm going to get rid of the links to mysticism. We're just going to go with a highly intelligent giant forest ape.
Yeah.
So this is Bigfoot we're going with. So why would we cover up a highly intelligent forest ape? There's the first reason is in that video where it's possibly a dog that they show the picture of being shot by the Hudson Bay Company, is you want your trappers to go out there and get you beavers. You want people to go to Canada and get trade. If there's a giant ape monster in the woods, people are going to be terrified. Hudson Bay Company is ridiculously powerful then. It's still ridiculously powerful now.
Yeah.
So you get a cult-like group or organization within it that is secretive by nature. It has to be secretive so people don't know about the ape. And then they are going to try to eliminate it. And maybe, like...
And the thing about the nature of secrecy as well is that it's self-sustaining. Because if you admit that you've been committing crimes in order to keep the Bigfoot secret after a while, then you are culpable. So you have to keep it going.
Yeah, and so you have the Hudson's Bay cult of Secret Service covering up the ape. So that's one part of it. The other thing is the same thing of panic, is we are the northern frontier, like America and Canada, even though there's so many people, there's so many states still, we are quite happy. We have conquered the bear, we've conquered the wolf, like up further north and further west you go, it gets a little bit more spooky, so you carry a bigger gun. But you want people living there, you want them to be happy, you want everyone to be fine. If we had definitive proof that there's giant stealthy apes walking around, I think a lot of people would run away.
Maybe. I think that...
Or even there's a worry that they wouldn't, so again, it's the secrecy on top of itself. I think that's the more likely, is the secrecy has bred secrecy.
Personally, I could change my mind on this, but I don't think there is any cover-up of Bigfoot or anything like that. But I think it's a completely legitimate answer, if you do think there is cover-up, to also just say, I don't know why they're covering it up, but they are. Because, for example, this is aliens, right? Yeah. Why are they? Let's say they're covering up aliens. Why are they covering up aliens? And a lot of people's answer is because of the mass scale panic. And I've never found that convincing, because I don't think people would panic from aliens. Joe Rogan, again, had an alien guy on recently, and he gave a terrifying reason for an alien cover-up that I was like, holy cow, I never thought of that. So if I thought, okay, there's an alien cover-up, but I don't know why, and then I heard that reason, I'd be like, that's the reason.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you just don't think of... You can admit, like, look, I'm not smart enough, or I don't know enough about the issue, or I haven't wargamed it enough to know why there's a cover-up, but there seems to be a cover-up based on these other details, right? Like, if you just think there's a cover-up for no reason, then sure, you can, but it's not very convincing. Yeah. But if you say, look, Men in Black arrive all the time when Bigfoot appears, and then they remove all evidence. I don't know why they're doing it, but they seem to be doing it. Yeah. That's totally fair. You don't have to give a reason. You can just... Totally fair. But so his reason for the alien one... which I'll just give it quickly because it's fascinating, was that so we see all these UFOs around like war sites, nuclear power plants, right? Yeah. And water treatment? Yeah, I think that might be one too. Well, but a lot of like missile silos and stuff.
So our game center, what's that little sector right below it on the hill? Isn't that some sort of facility? Like, I thought that was water treatment.
Oh yeah, what is that? I think that's just like a fire station or something, maybe.
Okay, that's where I saw my UFO.
Oh, you saw a UFO?
I think it totally about when I was exercising at the gym, I saw this little dot that I thought was a balloon, and then it moved impossibly fast upwards, and it's on shape and size, and it changed as it moved about, and then it just flew out of sight.
Could have been like a drone or something, you think? Or
It was perfectly round and really fast and moving in ways that drones can't.
No, I don't think you told me about that.
Okay, yeah. It's like a super subtle little UFO. I was just like on a sort of treadmill machine like this walker thing where you slide your feet back and forth. I'm looking out the window, and this UFO basically just went.
And you don't think it was like a floater or something?
No, it wasn't. Like I could look around from different windows and see it.
Or a trash can lid?
It looked like a balloon.
What if it was a trash can lid? Would that be more or less astounding?
For something to move like that, that'd be pretty insane. I think it'd make more sense that as a, and it wasn't like a UFO. Like it was, it looked like a round sphere. Like
it wasn't a flying saucer.
Yeah, it looked like a balloon.
Could it have been a balloon?
No, because it went up and down and
like caught in like a tornado or something.
Yeah, it moved.
We have
It moved in ways that the wind wouldn't have let it move. I have fired rockets into the air. I have witnessed weather testing balloons. It didn't move like they did.
Because we have I don't know what you call them, twisters, I guess here. Like we have sub-tornado strength wind phenomenon here.
Yeah.
And
it wasn't moving like those. It was moving in ways that
dust devils, I guess, is the
why I concluded it was a UFO and not a balloon is all other possibilities were eliminated by watching.
I mean, there could be possibilities you didn't think of.
Yeah.
But UFO kind of covers them by the nature of unidentified flying objects.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Like it could have been some type of drone that someone had. It's not any drone I've seen before.
Wow, it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So going back to regarding this dude's reason for why they would cover up UFOs.
Yeah.
So he said, so we see them around a lot of nuclear facilities, a lot of missile silos, that sort of thing, right? And that looks like reconnaissance. So if there was an invading army or a Cold War situation, you'd have your drones, your Gary Powers or whatever his name was, flying over their military bases, just scouting them out, seeing how strong they are. And now you'd want to do as much scouting as you could, gather as much information as you could before you attack, right? And one of the ways to respond to being scouted, if you detect that you're being scouted, against an unknown foe, is to pretend that you didn't notice them scouting you, and then you prepare as much weaponry and countermeasures as you can. So if you admit that you see them, then if you're scouting someone and then they notice you, your best course is now to attack, because you've gained all the information you can, and they know about you, and once they know about you, they're going to be getting ready for war as well, right? So what you can do is you can pretend you don't notice you're being scouted so that they don't attack. So the moment the government says, yeah, UFOs are real, the aliens are here, that's the time the aliens attack. So the government is trying to prevent the aliens from attacking by playing ignorant while they build up countermeasures against them.
Yeah.
And that was this guy's, one of his possibilities. He actually doesn't believe that's the case, but he said, here's one of the examples of why the government would cover it up. And I was like, that's a brilliant reason to cover it up.
Yeah.
And that's terrifying. So Bigfoot, it could be the same thing. Who knows?
Yeah.
Bigfoot will attack if we admit it. And so we need the Men in Black to get in and clear all the evidence that we interacted with them and that sort of thing. So you there are situations where you can have you don't know why there's a cover up, but you can see stuff that looks like a cover up all the same, right? And it could even just be covering up like, yeah, we knew there's these Bigfoot that are dangerous, but we told people to go there anyways, and now they're killing people and it looks bad, so we there do you remember that this was like 10 or 15 years ago, there was some report done on top secret information in it might have been the Canadian government, it might have been the American government, but they found that like basically officials would just stamp top secret on everything so that they didn't have anyone like double check their work.
Yeah.
It was just like, look, I don't want anyone to tell me I was wrong. I'm just going to call it top secret and check. So it's done. And so it was getting like totally abused. It was like, I can't remember. It was like 50% of it was just like meaningless. Or it was
I can see that being the case.
Yeah. And so you just go, I'll send the Men in Black. It's like, whatever, but just send them in. It was just a bear attack, but we're going to do it anyways, right?
Yeah.
And see, I don't need to know the reason. Yeah. Okay. So Zom 100. So it starts out, a guy has, he works for an exploitative anime company. He does animation or something, and his company grinds him into the ground. His life sucks because he has no energy to spend time with his friends. He hates his worker. His boss is abusive. the one light in his life is the secretary in the office, but she's in a relationship with their boss, and she's kind of enabling the boss in the first place, and all his workers just have no light in their eyes, light in their eyes, and everyone's miserable. And so he gets up one day, ready for another day at work. He's miserable as always, and he sees a zombie eating his neighbor.
And everything's in black and white.
Yeah, everything's in black and white up to this point. He sees a zombie eating his neighbor, and the blood splattering the zombie's face is like Technicolor blood. Yeah. It's like a bunch of colors. And he stares at it, and then he realizes, and the world slowly fills with color as he sees more and more zombies and all this Technicolor blood everywhere. So his life is regaining from color from seeing all this blood and destruction. And he realizes, I don't have to go to work today.
Yeah.
And so he's super excited, and he goes running across town celebrating that he doesn't have to go to work today, and his life turns around because he no longer has to go to work. And so he then sets out and he writes a book, which is 100 Things I Want to Do Before I Become a Zombie. So right off the bat, there's something really important there, which is 100 things to do before I become a zombie. It's not 100 things I want to do before I die. He's pretty sure he's going to become a zombie. He's going to eventually slip up and fail, and he's going to die. He doesn't think he's getting out of this alive. So I think the entire anime is very much a stoic philosophy piece. And it's a comedy, and it's a zombie survival technically, but I really think the zombie survival is a tiny portion of it.
Yeah.
Because
it's like social comedy.
Yeah, because there's portions like right at the first start, he jumps off his 5-story building and he lands on a bus shelter and crashes it, and then he runs across the street. And okay, so the rules of physics are light here, whatever. But there's another point where he has to make a similar jump, and it's actually really dangerous.
Yeah.
And so I think the actual survival, the rules there don't really matter so much as how he responds to the death and destruction around him.
Yeah.
So the first thing on his list is he wants to confess to the woman he loves. So he goes to her apartment. He finds out where it is. He goes up to her apartment, and he knocks on the door, and he sees his boss answers the door, but his boss is a zombie. And so he goes and he knocks his boss out the window of the building and kills his boss.
Yeah.
And then he goes to the bedroom of this secretary who he loves room, and he sees that she's become a zombie as well. And so he breaks down there and he starts crying, and he admits to her while he's crying that he always loved her, and even though they'll never go out, he just wanted to let her know that he loved her. And then he kills her as well, I think, and he leaves. And so that part, to me, it was very much this is something that's tricky to do in real life, right? Because
it's really tricky to admit you love someone and then kill them. That's kind of get sent to jail for that.
No, the tricky part is that it would be incredibly selfish to go up to someone who's, let's say, in another relationship and say, look, I just want you to know that I always loved you, and I always will, and you were the one for me. That's incredibly selfish and creepy, right?
Yeah.
But the thing that he does, because she's dead already, right?
Yeah.
So the important thing he does with that, and he doesn't do this in a creepy way because she's dead, but the important thing he does is he actually admits to himself that he always loved her, that he messed up, that he should have told her sooner. And so what he's actually doing is he's accepting that he'll never be with her.
Yeah.
By admitting to her that he loves her, he's accepting that he'll never be with her. So what he's actually doing is he's confessing to himself, to God, that that relationship's never going to happen, and yet he loved her. And so he's saying you can feel love, and you can feel the sorrow of that unrequited love, and you can move on. And so he basically moved on from there. And so it's every I saw a complaint about the anime, which was that every episode ends in this massive downer after it's super funny. But actually every episode is ending in a release. It's ending in him fixing his life and becoming more honest and doing his bucket list. And one of the catchphrases throughout it is, I'd rather become a zombie than not confess to the woman I love. I'd rather become a zombie than not play video games on a giant big screen TV.
Yeah.
And so what he's saying right there is, it's like, fear isn't going to stop me. I'm going to, if something is valuable enough that I think it's something I want to do, I'm going to take any risk there is to do it, because I decided this is something that I want to do with my life.
Yeah.
You only get so much life, so you're going to do it. So the next, I'm going to be skipping a few things, of course, but the next major thing I think he does is he frees his friend who's trapped in a love hotel with a zombie. And so he frees his best friend from college. And they end up getting onto a roof where they're trapped by zombies, and they have to jump across the roof to another roof to escape. And so the main character runs and he jumps. They're both like superstar athletes, which is kind of important for the story, I guess, in a way, because they do all these athletic feats.
Yeah, they're football players.
Yeah, they're these like pro football players. And so he runs and he jumps across the gap and he gets to the other side and he says to his friend, "You got to jump across." But his friend is terrified of heights and he's like, "No, I'd just rather die than risk this jump." And he's like, "Come on, you got to jump across." He's like, "Look, no, I've been living a lie this whole time. I never loved my job as a real estate salesman or whatever it was." Yeah. He's saying, I just wanted you to be impressed by my girlfriend and by my money, but I didn't even love her, and the money didn't matter to me because I hated my job, and sure, I had free hours, but I had to work all the time and phone people, and I was always on call, and I hated it." And he's like, "So what do you want?" And the zombies are coming closer. He's like, "So what do you want to do?" And he's like, "I wanted to be a comedian. I wanted to make people laugh." He's like, "Come on, you can make people laugh. You'll make people laugh." And he's like, "But what if I die if I make it?" Well, it's like, you can, you'll make people laugh. And so then his friend's like, "Okay, fine." And he runs and he jumps and he tears off all his clothes as he jumps across the gap.
Yeah.
And so he makes someone laugh, and he puts his life at risk, but he makes someone laugh. And so at that moment, his friend also becomes the person that has decided, death isn't what scares me, not doing my dreams is what scares me.
Yeah.
And so that's really the message of the whole series, right? It's like there are things worse than death, and that the main thing that is worse than death is not doing what you believe you should be doing.
Yeah.
And not completing your bucket list of the 100 things you want to do before you become a zombie. And so then the episode after that, they want to go on a date with flight stewardesses, which might be a cultural thing that I didn't get. Cause
I think that's sort of like the Japanese, the maids,
right,
going on a date with maids.
But they seem to think flight steward is a fairly prestigious role as well. So I don't know if it's a better paying job or a more
I think it's the
thing.
old-fashioned look of the flight stewards, so that they were attractive women who...
Right.
Or jet saying they went around and had a lot of relationships. They were never tied down. So you get to go on a date with a flight stewardess. That's kind of this fancy, fun thing that's this attractive woman who could have anyone, literally, because she flies around the world, chooses you.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. So they want to go on a date with these flight stewardesses, and they also want to get a giant big screen TV for their setup.
Yeah.
And they're thinking, okay, power's not going to last, so we need to get the big screen TV soon. So they go to the mall to grab this big screen TV. And they meet flight stewardess there, and they actually go on a date with them. And then the flight stewardess end up dying. And it's quite sad. They get eaten by zombies. And he talks to them, and he says, thank you for taking on a date. It was the most wonderful time of my life. Yeah. And again, it's similar to the love confession, but this time it's just saying, thank you. I'm glad I had this experience, even though you died. And so it's this devastating moment, and he walks out of the building, and his best friend's there with this giant big screen TV, and he's like, "Come on, you got to help me carry this." And you think it's this mood whiplash, but it's actually just this. There's nothing we can do about it. Yeah. They died. We wanted the big screen TV. Yeah. So now we got the big screen TV. It's the still. I'm doing what I love, even though it hurts. You would think that what would happen is, okay, this flight stewardess died. You reassess your life. You're like, okay, no, I have to avoid pain because it hurts to love. But instead it's, no, I loved and it hurt, and I can still keep on going, and I can still keep on doing the things I want to do.
Going back in time in the episodes, too, I think it's the first episode, or the second, he wanted to stay home all day and drink beer. Yeah. And so he goes to the corner shop nearby. That's when he drops off the roof and he goes to the corner shop. He also wanted to ride a motorcycle, and so he does that. And he's at this corner shop, and he's collecting beer, and there's a different person there who's a survivalist.
Yeah, and she has a book called 100 Things to Do to Avoid Being a Zombie.
Yeah, but she's gathering important food, and then she sees him getting beer and this garbage food. Yeah. And then he has the sweets as well. And she's reaches to get cake, and then she doesn't get it because no, this isn't good for me. It'll mess me up. I can't have a cake right now. And a huge amount of bad stuff happens. So you think this guy's a lunatic. And then he goes home with his beer and he drinks his beer.
Yeah, or she's living in fear.
And she's not doing what she loves. She's not enjoying herself.
What she's doing is she's guaranteeing her survival. Yeah. But she's guaranteeing her survival for nothing. She doesn't have a world that it matters to survive in. It's what's the point of surviving if... Because what he's doing, he's I'm probably going to die, but I'm going to do what I love. Where she's going to probably survive, but it's kind of the same thing. You can't win without principles. Yeah. Because if you cheat to win, you didn't win anything, right? Yeah. And so in her case, it's okay, you're winning. You're not winning. You're surviving. But what are you surviving for exactly? Yeah. What is the point of being alive? And you think, well, the point of being alive is to fulfill your purpose, but your purpose is more than just staying alive.
And her background story is very similar to his in a lot of ways. He was basically ground down in the life he had, and she's you have to be the very best as possible by her father. Yeah. And so she was ground down in a different way.
So I think we can.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's. Okay.
Being the superhero.
I mean that's kind of more of the same. I think. There's important lessons all the way through, but I think we can skip probably ahead when he meets his boss's boss again. Yeah. So he meets his manager. So this part is really interesting. I think, and it's my least favorite episode. I think because it's very painful to watch. Yeah. But I think it's important. So he.
It was more painful as I was watching while it was releasing, and so I got stuck on the cliffhanger of him having that happen. I had to wait for the next episode, which came out a week later.
So he escapes Tokyo with this survivalist girl and his best friend, and they get stopped by a roadblock, which is run by his manager, who is a very smart man. He's very talented at organizing people. So he actually manages to create a society where people can survive. But he continues. He's a very micromanaging, abusive. Like you have to do everything my way, and if I change my mind, you have to read my mind to know that I changed it. But he does create a successful society, and so he says, "Okay, I'll give you fuel. I'll repair your car if you work for me for like a day, and then you move on." And so they're okay, just work for him for a day, whatever, that's fine. And his best friend gets injured in a car crash just before that, which the manager caused, but still the manager offers to fix everything. And so his best friend can't help out with the work, and the survivalist girl's a layabout or something. I wasn't really sure about that part, but I guess she didn't agree to the deal. But so he says, I'll fix everything up for you if you just work for me for a single day. And so he thinks, and this is where dark magic comes in, right? Because he thinks, okay, I hate this guy, I hate working for him, but it's just a day, right? Yeah. So I can work for this guy. So, and his life, everything's been colors and rainbows since the zombie apocalypse happened. He didn't have to go to work. And he's like, okay, I'll work for my manager just for a day. And then he instantly snaps back into it, crushing his spirit. Like he's still fragile. He isn't over it. It's just he's been given this release, which is the release is that he doesn't have to go to work because the zombies killed everyone. Yeah. But the moment that work is an option, he's back at it. And suddenly he realizes he was never free. It was an illusion caused by the zombies, but the freedom didn't come from himself. Yeah. And so the next episode, roughly, because it's the end of that episode and the first half of the next episode, it's just him getting crushed down again as the world becomes black and white again, basically, as he slaves away under this manager again. And then the manager says, well, you can stay for me longer, it's safer here. And he's like, yeah, it is safer. I should stay here because it's scary to go out into the world, because it's the comforting blanket of safety, which again is what the girl does, right? Her whole thing is that it's better to be safe than to be doing what you care about. And so he thinks, and when he's working for his manager, he's like, yeah, I'm safe now, so I have to stay with my manager, even though I'm dying.
Yeah, he's done so much for me. I have to pay him back.
But it's also like, it's safety, right? It's like, this is what's comfortable and what I'm used to, so it's safe, and change is dangerous.
And there definitely is the feeling of obligation.
Yeah.
To him, like he's being crushed by the obligation.
Yeah, to this man. His debt to the man and what he owes him, because the man did boost his career, made him rich, made him. Gave him his dream job, technically. Yeah. But he just turned out he didn't actually like his dream job. Yeah. But then zombies, they have a mess up, basically, and zombies break into the encampment, and they end up fighting off the zombies. And he manages to save his manager's life, and everyone abandons his manager because of it. And the manager says to him, okay, wow, geez, he's like, I need you, though. Because you are actually an amazing worker, and I need you with me. And so... even though, the zombie threat comes again, so he's free again, and suddenly he's free and he's happy and he's jumping around. But then they deal with the zombie threat, and the manager's still there, and all the workers are all still there, and the manager says, I need you to stay with me. And this time, and I believe he actually agrees to stay with the manager. But then the girl, whose whole thing was, you just got to do what's safe, gives him his Zom 100 book and says, didn't you say you wanted to do these 100 things before you became a zombie? Yeah. And he looks at it and he realizes, yeah, no, it's better to go back out into danger, to go out of order into chaos, as it were. Yeah. I'd rather become a zombie than not live in a treehouse and not see my parents and not go to a hot springs and everything else. And so he says to the manager, no, I'm sorry, but I got to leave. I got to do the things I want to do. And so this time, it's not the external world that frees him. It's himself that frees himself. He says, no, I myself want to quit the job. It's not, I don't have to go to work tomorrow, not because there's a disaster. Because, praying for, I don't know if you've ever seen Paranoia Agent. No. It's basically everyone is praying to be injured by this serial killer so that they can have an excuse. And so it's basically that, right? It's like, oh, there's a zombie apocalypse, now I don't have to take responsibility for my own life.
Yeah, it's a very common thing of wanting to have an injury, wanting to have a disaster happen to you, but it's not threaten me enough to take you out, but it just makes it so you have no responsibility.
Yeah, and so that's what Paranoia Agent's about. It's about this like angel of death that basically frees everyone from responsibility. But in this time the main character takes responsibility.
Yeah.
He says, okay, I'm going to quit on my own terms. This time I actually quit. It's not just because there's zombies, I quit. Like, whether or not there's zombies, because I just dealt with all the zombies, but I'm still going to quit. And so they go out and they leave. And so that episode, it's pretty painful because it's very sad to see him fall back into the hole. But this time he gets out on his own initiative rather than just because of circumstantial.
Yeah.
Which means he's free now. If boss comes again or someone like him, he's free because he knows he knows how to get out now. And so I think that episode's pretty important. And then I think the next one is basically right to the end with the villain. I think that's the next kind of important plot point I can think of.
I can think of another important plot point.
What, the samurai girl?
Yeah.
She's fun. I don't know if she for the purposes of the stoic lessons, I'm not sure. Like, I think she adds stuff, obviously.
Yeah.
But I don't like.
Like, is there anything new that has been added?
Like the big key plot points.
Yeah. Is there anything like it's a lot of the same? It's a lot of continuing stories. A lot of them.
I wouldn't even say it's the same. Like, it's not repetitive by any means. It's reinforcing the lesson in different ways each time.
Yeah.
But just so I think the next big one, he gets to the home of his parents, and they've created this because they're off the grid people in this little town. They're able to actually survive even with the zombie apocalypse going on, and so they've all survived basically his whole hometown. And so there's about half an episode of just them living back on the hometown, and it's actually important. He comes to his dad and he says, finally, I can repay you for all. He realizes that, he went off to school and he never even phoned his parents or talked to them in like 4 years. And so he comes back and he's like, finally, I can repay them. I was such a bad son. They let me go off to school, and I can come back and I can live with them for the rest of my life and take care of them, and I can repay them for what they did. So he goes back and he goes to his dad and his mom. He says, I'm going to repay you. And his dad just punches him in the face. Yeah. And so he's a lot, like the next 2 episodes or so are him wondering with the question. And I like to think like each problem, like in a classroom, like a kid's classroom, you show like Dora the Explorer, right? Yeah. The first half, Dora presents a question, and then the kids watching, it's like, okay, what's the answer? Which square do you put in the bridge, right? Yeah. So the question this time is not which square will fix the bridge, it's how do you repay your parents? Yeah. That's the question he keeps asking himself over and over again. And like whenever he tries, he's like, Dad, I'll help you with the farming. His dad's like, I don't want you to help me with the farming. And his dad like punches him whenever he sees him. He's like, what's going on? I just, I went to school and now I've come back to do all the work for you guys and spend it. And finally, he finally comes out as like, your dream was to go off to the city and to be an artist, right? Yeah. You repay me by living well. That's the lesson. They never really explicitly state it, but that's the answer. It's all they wanted they don't need him to come visit him. They don't need him to phone him. Yeah. They want him. It's Abraham sacrificing Isaac, right? It's sacrifice the relationship for the child. The way you can repay it is not to throw back that sacrifice. It's like, we gave up everything so you could go to the city, and now you've come back here and you've decided to stay in the town. You've thrown our gift back in our face. Yeah. So the way you repay your parents is you live well. Yeah, well, even he could actually help his father, but if he wants to, yeah, it's not. Well, it's not just if he wants to. It's if he's doing. It's not just if he wants to. It's if he's doing the things he truly believed he wanted to be doing. Yeah. And the thing he wants to be doing is being an artist. So he's not doing what he should be doing. That doesn't mean he can't visit his parents or anything, but it's you can't just live there now and take care of them, because the way how do you repay your parents? The answer is you live well. Yeah. So they have this, and he doesn't really realize that until the very end of the last episode. Yeah. But before that occurs, one of the people that comes to the village is a guy that has a very similar life story to him, who has a book called 100 Things I Want to Do Before I Become a Zombie. Yeah. And this part's fascinating because the whole point of Zom 100, as we've talked about, is even with his parents, like, how do you repay your parents? You do what you want, right? Yeah. And all throughout, it's like, hey, what do you want to do? It's like, do whatever you want. Do what you want. Do what you want. And so he thinks, I'd rather do what I want. I'd rather become a zombie than not do what I want. Yeah. So the whole lesson of the whole anime is the most important thing you can do in your life is what you want to do. Yeah. There's nothing more important than doing what you want to do. That's the way you repay your parents. That's the way you live well. And it's even better to die trying to do what you want to do than anything else. Yeah. So this new character comes who has a book of doing everything I want to do. And he has a gang of people that want to do what they want to do. But the stuff they want to do is like force a girl to kiss me. Yeah. I want to shoot a gun. I want to burn down a village. I want to kill people. I want to turn people into zombies. Yeah. I want to get revenge on people. And so
revenge against the world.
Yeah, I want revenge against the world. And so these guys destroy the village, basically. And at the end, the main character manages to stop him, of course.
Yeah.
And at the end, he says, "But I was just doing what you wanted to do. Like I was just doing the same thing as you. I was just doing what I wanted to do. Why I lived a miserable life? You had an easy life. You had all these friends. You had the sports team. I had no friends. I didn't have the sports team. I didn't have anyone. I struggled to get to the university. I worked really hard. I was one of the top students. You didn't even try, and you were one of the top students. And I was miserable all the time, and you're having fun. Why can't I get to do what I want to do too? Like, it's not fair." And you hear it in those terms, you think, yeah, this really isn't fair, right? Like, this guy just has... And you see this a lot in... I've talked about how a bunch of nerds write all the Hollywood stuff. It's like, it's not fair that, we got a revenge against those jocks because they just get it all easy and we're... But the key thing that I think in real life as well, a lot of people miss, they show flashbacks of him not having any friends. Yeah. And the main character is like, "Hey, we're going to go swimming. You want to come with us?" He's like, "No." And he gets afraid. He's like, "Whoa, no, I'm too nervous to go."
Yeah.
And so he resents him for Sam Vaknin, that narcissist specialist, psychologist. He had this great line where he said, "When you give someone a gift, it's an insult." And he said, "Do you know why it's an insult?" It's like, because whenever you give someone a gift, you're saying you don't have this.
That is so twisted.
But it's like, "Hey, you want to hang out with us? Oh, you don't think I have friends?"
God, that is so twisted.
But it's kind of true.
Yeah. But... And I like that whole thing where it's like, you should have gone to the pool with us. I love that scene, actually, where it's the flashback, and it's saying, well, it's the sort of, after they had that flashback, and the guy's like just pouring his art out to the main character, saying, yeah, all the stuff, he stole his stuff. You can still go to the pool with these. Like, we should go to the pool together. Like, let's do that.
Yeah. Yeah, and
it's
then...
like, that's something you want to do. You want to go to the pool with us. Let's go to the pool.
Yeah, actually, so just quickly on the gift thing. Because that was something that was bothering me, actually. Like, you gave me this Catechus, like, Hermes statue, right? Yeah. And you also gave me this Japanese bowl, which is, like, the art of smashing bowls and then putting them back together with golden lacquer. And on the one hand, I thought they were really cool. And on the other hand, I was really insulted by them. And I couldn't figure it out. I was like, what on earth is, like... Why? I can't stand to look at this thing. Like, I'm like, what's going on here? And I think that's what it was. It was like... Oh, you think I'm like this sickly person or this shattered, broken person, but don't worry, you can put yourself back together even though you're broken with the. And I think it was the same idea. It was like this. Oh yeah, what Sam Vaknin said is like, it makes you confront who you actually are and how you yourself view yourself, because it's not an insult if someone gives you like a book that you're interested in and you're like, oh yeah, cool, because you don't see that as a lack in yourself. But you see that lack in yourself, but nobody knows about my secret lack in myself. And then that guy is like, nobody knows I'm a loner. But then they say, hey, you want to hang out? He's like, whoa, oh, now they know I'm a loner, and it destroys it.
Yeah, I was pretty certain that Hermes was your favorite god.
Yeah. And you don't have to defend your gifts at all.
Yeah, no. I got myself my favorite god, which is Aphrodite. Well, second favorite. My favorite one wasn't available to get.
But yeah, yeah, so the pool, going to the swimming pool thing then. Yeah. So what was going on was he's like, why can't I get to do what I want to do?
Yeah.
And the reason he can't get to do what he wants to do is because he's not doing what he wants to do. He's acting out of fear even then.
Did you watch it with the original Japanese voice actor?
Yeah.
The guy's screaming in pain, like, even though it's Japanese interview, he is amazing. Like him like crying about what he couldn't get to. Like that voice actor nailed that sort of mindset and feeling of self-loathing. Yeah. Yeah, where he's like, how come I didn't get to do what I want to do? And the answer is, we've talked about this before, you can be a stripper who just eats Cheetos all day and lays on the couch as long as you're serving God, right? As long as that's what you want to do. As long as that's actually what you want to do. Yeah. But taking revenge on the world is not something anyone wants to do, right? Yeah. That's you lashing out because you feel cheated, because maybe you just had horrible luck, or maybe you never took the opportunities that were before you. Or maybe you never, because there are more opportunities than you see, like, all the time, right? This is true of everyone. And so sometimes you pass them over, or you're too late, or you're too afraid, or whatever else it might be. Like, I know I've done that countless times, right? Like, you look back like a year and you're like, why did I not do that? And that's what a lot of Zone 100 is about, is like where he says, I want to confess to the girl that I love her. He could have told her at any point, and he didn't until she died. But and so what you could do in his situation is like, well, she's dead now, so I don't have to confess. It's like, no,
you heal by confessing.
Yeah.
And now don't do that to a real life person, because that's creepy and it's cruel. You're making your problem someone else's problem.
Yeah.
But what you can do, if there's an unrequited love, this girl gets married that you love, you can, in your own home,
create a little creepy totem of her, have her pictures all on the walls, you have her shrine to her.
I was thinking more you can just say, I love her and I'll never have her. Like, just say it out loud when there's no one around, like...
Steal her hair.
Yeah.
When she's not home, sleep in her bed.
Yeah. And only when she's not home, though. Otherwise, it's creepy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this guy... So the answer to doing whatever you want is not this raw hedonism of just this list of things that you think. It's actually what you truly want, and not just getting revenge on the world for the crime of your own failures. Because he never, even when he was freed by the zombie apocalypse, he was never actually happy. He was never able to do the things... Because what he wanted to do was go to the pool with his friends. Yeah. And then in the end, he does exactly that. He goes to the pool with his friends. And
There was a bit of a controversy with when this anime was releasing, because I think it had slightly less episodes than an anime typically would for its season. I think it only has 10 episodes.
I'm not sure, but...
they took a massive break in making it. Like, people's like, wait, why isn't an episode on? They, took a 2 or 4 week break.
Well, it'd be kind of weird if an anime about the exploitative practices of the anime industry was working their workers to the bone.
Yeah, and that's another people they keep reusing these scenes and they're not drawing as much as they could.
It'd be pretty hypocritical if they didn't do. This was their first anime too. I believe.
Yeah, well, one of the things that the studio actually said with them reusing their scenes is we want to make every scene as amazing as possible. So if that means we're not drawing as many scenes, we're going to make each scene.
But even in the reusing the scenes, I thought they did a really good job of, they continued the dialogue forward, and they recontextualized the scenes even. So it was kind of like hoodwinked, where you see the same thing from a different angle in a way.
Yeah. So one of the other, this just goes back to the comedy of the whole show, is there's this really sad thing, and basically gets back home and his father is hiding that he's sick, and his father has all these problems. And he slowly realizes his father's ill. That's he's sad his dad's dying.
And you keep seeing him look at a wound or something, and he's like, I only have a few more days. And you're like, oh, he's got zombie bite or something.
Yeah, or he has some genetic sickness.
Yeah.
He's hemorrhoids.
Yeah. But I think even that was, not everything is doom and gloom and the worst possible thing. Sometimes there are, secrets and misunderstandings that are just... embarrassing or funny.
Yeah, well, the old man of the village who was always really happy when those 2 young girls were around. Here's the trope, but... And, his mom's this amazing, lovely person, but she calls him an idiot. There's a lot about that village I really liked, about all the little interactions. And even the anti-main cast. There's the evil version of the main character.
And there's the big fat guy
and the samurai girl fights the other person who has a weapon that breaks the
fencer.
chainsaw.
Yeah. Champion fencer, yeah.
Yeah. Just each of their, counter dialogues is really interesting as well. Of how each one of these persons has a reason why they resent the universe.
Yeah.
And then they are forced to face who they are if they were who they should be. That's what each of them was faced to, basically... Who they could be, who they
could have been if they had been taking all the risks, the right risks,
and if they were truly doing what they wanted to do.
Because that's the other thing about dark magic is that it's not free, right? It's risky, and so you think, oh, I'm giving a sacrifice. Why aren't I gaining anything?
Yeah.
But you have to make it's not enough to make a sacrifice. You have to make the right sacrifices.
Yeah.
And the sacrifices are often, like it says, in accordance with nature, right? It's they're almost blindingly simple. It's you have to feel fear. You have to feel love. You have to admit that you're sad. You have to admit that you're excited. You have to admit that you care. You have to admit you care about something as stupid as playing video games on a big screen TV is in your top 100 things of your life. You have to admit that that's important to you.
So in Berserker, there's these little totem things. And they basically are how you contact demons. It's how you contact the God Hand. And the God Hand can turn you into a demon. However, you have to make a sacrifice to the God Hand. And it's shown... So Guts is fighting a demon, basically. And the demon still has his daughter. It's the one thing tying himself to the universe. And Guts beats him, but demons are ridiculously tough. And so his severed corpse, like the head of his corpse, cries out to the God's Hand and summons them again and says, sacrifice, I have a sacrifice to you. It's Guts. Like, sacrifice him, give me more power. And so I can defeat him, be like, take him. And they say, you can't sacrifice Guts. You don't care about him. Only someone that you care about and they care about you can you sacrifice to the God Hand. Give us your daughter. It's like, no, I can't give you my daughter. She's the only thing of value I have. And so to become a demon in Guts' world, because only humans turn into demons, you have to sacrifice something you love and something that loves you back. And so why so many people hate Griffith, which is like the main villain, he's the head of the God's Hand, is he has this mercenary company that loves him. And they did everything for him. They sacrificed so much. And Griffith has had a rough time. He was tortured for a year in a dungeon. He had all his tendons severed. He had his tongue removed. He is this tiny husk of a man who can't even like feed himself anymore. And his mercenary company rescue him. They're trying to take care of him. And they encounter basically Earth and the demon realm collide with each other, and all the demons are gathered. And they're trying to figure out what's going on. And Griffith sees a spear in the ground. And so he tries to kill himself because, like, his company's taking care of him. He can't even communicate to them that he just wants to die. But he had this dream of being a king when he was a kid. So he stabs himself through the throat with a spear. And he's slowly dying. And then the demons basically send him visions of, you can be the king. Why are you giving up on this dream? All it costs you to give up on this dream is to sacrifice. All you need to do to not give up this dream is sacrifice everything. And so he lets the demons kill his company. And the reason Guts is the way he is he is a man that refuses to die. And so the demons are trying to kill Guts, and he doesn't go down. And he gets saved by someone else who's also gone through. He gets saved by the Skeleton Knight. And so why it's called Berserker is Guts is fueled only by rage and vengeance. There's nothing left in him but to kill Griffiths and every apostate that serves Griffiths. And Griffiths' dark magic, though, is you have to sacrifice something that matters. Like, demons are awful. Like, whenever you get the backstory of the demon, it's like, oh, it's got a sympathetic backstory. Something bad happened to them, and now they're making up for it, and they got revenge. Just like, no. Demons might have had a bad life, but what they had to do to then become a demon was never worth it.
Yeah, 'cause what Griffith's men sacrificed was from love, right? They were saying, like, we will, it's hard to take care of someone who's horribly injured, and they might have been doing the wrong thing by taking care of him too, it sounds like, but they were making a sacrifice there of one born of them trying to do the best they could, even though it cost them. Whereas Griffiths was doing the sacrifice, and again, it's okay to make a sacrifice to, like, it's okay to sacrifice your safety in order to go out and get the big screen TV from the zombies, but he was making the sacrifice of those he loved, not for the love, but for a vision that is lesser than the love.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like, because if he actually cared about the vision more, then he wouldn't have had a thing to sacrifice, right? Because he would have. So he just gave in to this this vision over, and so Guts, you could say, even his sacrifice is that he's not dying, like he's decided not to die, right? So he is.
Well, like, Guts is haunted by the spirits of dead every single day. He can't be around people because they will die because demons want to kill him. Like,
but you could say that Guts is actually making the right kind of sacrifices, right? Like he's trying to, he's sacrificing company of people. Even maybe that's the right kind of sacrifice, or maybe it's not. Maybe you should take the risk anyways. And...
Well, yeah, the story is really interesting because he has Puck, and Puck is. I feel like a lot of people read the Berserker manga like a certain amount, and they saw Puck, and like, oh, have a stupid little funny friend to follow someone around, because that is what Puck is basically. He's like this little fairy that is annoying, and he follows Guts around. But there's a reason why Berserker is one of the greatest manga ever written. It's the reason why you can't actually find it in manga stores. They have it hidden in the back because people steal them, because they're expensive. But people want them so much, people are willing to steal Berserker. And Puck is well written. Puck actually is it's an alien fairy creature, and he is what is slowly helping Guts retrieve his humanity. And what's even more insane is Guts didn't have humanity to start with. His whole life was awful. He had like 3 years of humanity, and then it was torn away from him. And even then, he was a really messed up person. And then some weird elf is helping him.
I just had a connection. I don't know if this was ever intentional, but The Wanderer, the poem, right? Yeah. I've been translating it to modern English a little bit. And so the first line of the poem in my version is, often the lonely was spared from the sword, and so he must sorrow the grace of his Lord. Because the idea of the Wanderer is that the Wanderer is alone because God loves him. Because there was a battle and everyone he loved died except for him. Yeah. And so he just goes around in this abject loneliness where even if he goes to a place with people, he can't talk to any of them because he either brings down the mood or he tries to talk to them about simple things, but they're not his friends. They're not people he can trust to speak with. And, they're not the people he knows and loves. And the Berserk seems very similar in a way, like.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely.
I wonder if it's inspired or if it's just I guess it's probably a fairly common idea.
Yeah. It's, Maps of Meaning.
Yeah.
Have basically all stories are the same story.
Yeah, this is the story of loneliness.
It's the story
or exile. Even.
It's the story. Yeah, it's the story of exile and revenge, and it is one of the best told versions of it because it is. I don't know. The guy's just a genius. That's the simplest way to put it. The mangaku, the drawer, and the writer of it. He did both. He's a genius.
You have to read it sometime.
It's really dark. Also, I discovered something that pissed me off. It really annoyed me, actually. I had the physical copies, but one of them was coming a little bit later, and I really wanted to read it, so I kind of buckled down and went to an online translation of it. And I was reading it, and then I got the copy, and it got localized by the online version. So one of the things I will say about Berserk is read physical copies of it, because the online localized versions of it are not controlled by the original manga company that translated it. Oh. And they translate it way worse. They miss points, they ruin jokes, they ruin names.
Oh, gee.
You need to actually have the physical, officially Dark Horse translated copies. And I don't know if it's the same as the English, but that sort of made me realize that this has probably happened multiple times in stories I've read. I was like, I got really mad about it.
Oh, I do wonder, I don't know if I assume you watch dubbed anime mostly?
I watch subbed.
Okay, because I was curious if the reason I don't like anime is maybe because I watch the subbed and it's worse or something, but I guess not. I have to get going, so we'll have to wrap it up there.
Yeah. Berserker is very good and very disturbing at the same time, though. God.
And I guess we couldn't quite link the Pythagoras to the story, but I think they were similar lessons.
Having them both there. You can
kind of neat.
Make your own link. Yeah. It's up to you now.
Yeah. That's your homework.
Yeah. Write a 20-page... No, write 1,000-comment...
No.
1,000-word essay in the comments.
Yeah. You have until Friday.
They will be marked.
If we get one, I will mark it. All right. Okay. Bye. Bye.